Yeah, so we're running with a slim down crew here, but we were thinking of talking about not anime. Sorry, excuse me. I That's where my mind's at. We were thinking of talking about organizing. We have a few people who've organized. I guess all of you have organized. It just happens to be that all of you have been organizers in the past. So we could explore that, and like, what's it like? Well, what you organize for, what's it like to be an organizer, your frustrations, which Amanda was giving us a preview of, right? And What would you see maybe the future of organizing, especially with all the changes that have been happening in terms of in terms of both technology, right? For instance, like people using mobile phones, not picking up, like going back to the phone banking thing for a second, or just like societal changes, especially in the face of the pandemic. There's so many things that we can cover. So yeah, I'm excited to jump into this with y'all. So yeah, who wants to go for like what is? Let's start this. Why did you want to be an organizer? We'll hit each of you. All right. So Amanda.
Yeah, so my story is a little different. So I got involved in politics because I got upset at the system. And so I got involved starting lobbying as a hobby at the Capitol and got super frustrated with how the process and the people, mostly the people, so I was a GOP trifecta. And I realized that I could help elect people that wouldn't be so difficult to talk about issues with. So I decided to get on the campaign side in politics as opposed to just advocating and whatnot.
Go ahead, Neo. Why do you?
Yeah, I just fell into it. So I was been a raging lefty for a long time. I was like 15, and went to a lot of protests and did a lot of stuff. And at first, I did an internship like in an anti-war organization like in 2007, and then I was in college. I was doing all sorts of lefty stuff in college and various groups. But then when I got out of college, I was like, I want to be more serious. Like I don't just want to rant about left politics and protests. It's like I want to get stuff done. I want to win. So I got lucky, and a friend referred me to this community organizing group that does like lefty politics, and that's how I got my start with them. Actually, I helped. Buddy, I helped like organize stuff around like the organizer around like Occupy back in the day. That was cool. I mean, I was part of Occupy as well, but like they did all this stuff, and they were like, "Oh, here's this group that has all these people that want to do all this stuff, but they don't really have a lot of structure." So I helped them like plan actions, like protests outside of banks, and like tons of different things, demands and things. And then from that, like they got me involved in like I said, ballot initiatives. Like so, I think what a lot of people here will say, the women here will say, I think that like a lot of people obviously get their attention. You first probably pay attention to politics frequently because of like something terrible going on nationally or like maybe statewide. But the most effective place you'll be is locally. So that was really great to dive into like local issues because like you have great impact. I work for like a community nonprofit that has a very small budget, but they pay organizers to go out and like they've done all this great work getting like I don't know if it's got national attention, but like in LA, I think it was 2016. LA passed like a local ballot initiative to build housing for 10,000 homeless people. I mean, that's a drop in the bucket because we have a lot more homeless people than 10,000 people. But that was just like, that's a problem that needs to be solved nationally. Like, that probably needs the federal government to house all the homeless. But, it was like, oh, wow, we have this terrible problem. And it's still really terrible, getting worse. But it was like, well, we can do something about it. And that's just people getting together, like, for that, right? That's how I got into organizing, just like because I wanted to be effective. I'm still a raging lefty, but it's taught me a lot about, how to be effective and how to scale that up.
Interesting. All right. PrimeCayes.
Yeah, I mean, I had always been big into volunteering. So I mean, all throughout like high school, college, then when right after college, I moved to New York City. I was involved with volunteering for a lot of these like nonprofits. I volunteered for Covenant House, which is they are a homeless shelter, and they are nationwide, but in their New York chapter specifically, they focus a lot on teen moms and giving them a safe place to live and, raise their kids. And then they also have job programs and other things. So I was always really involved with that kind of stuff. And then the first time I volunteered for a political campaign was Bernie Sanders in 2016. I had never done anything like that, but I was inspired by him. Like I think a lot of people were. It was someone who finally spoke the language and was identifying issues in society that I had seen and that I had never heard a politician talk like that before. And so I felt galvanized and ready to jump out and get involved. But I didn't do a ton. I kind of did it when once in a while where I was like, oh yeah, I'll go help with an event once every couple months, not a big deal. And then you didn't get the nomination, whatever. And I remember I was sitting on my living room floor, sobbing on election night in 2016, when it was clear that Donald Trump was elected president. And I was heartbroken, and I couldn't help but think, what if I had done something more? What if I had pushed a little bit harder? And so I promised myself that night, I said, I'm going to give myself tonight to be sad and to mourn and to grieve about what's happening. But come tomorrow, this begins. I can't sit on the sidelines again. I can't be. I don't want people to have to look at myself in the mirror and not think that I did everything I could to prevent something like that from happening again. And so I got involved. I got involved with a lot of local stuff. And then in 2019, I got involved with Elizabeth Warren's campaign because I freaking adore her. And I just kind of jumped headfirst into it. And I was really lucky that the people who live in the Bay Area who were involved with the campaign were fantastic mentors for showing me the ropes of exactly how to organize and, what is the most effective and what are the things that I should spend my time thinking about. And I became a community leader within volunteering in the Warren campaign, and I got to know staffers and other things. And it was such a rewarding experience. And I also realized doing that, I'm like, wait, I'm really good at this and I like it. And I ended up going and knocking doors in Nevada. I went to Iowa and knocked doors. I mean, I just dove right into it because I really enjoyed it. And it was about something I cared about. And then of course, when she dropped out and then the lockdown happened, it was all virtual. So trying to do that. And now it's taken on a professional, it's sort of become more of a professional thing because I helped found a media agency that specializes in helping or working with, we say progressive, but it really is the spectrum of Democrats. I like how Josie describes it. It's like social Democrats. We work with social Democratic campaigns and, initiatives or organizations that are doing good in the world. And that's who we're helping. So Ragtag, which is my company. So yeah, it's it was just something I did in my spare time. And now it is a significant part of what I do for a living. And it's something I care about so much. And I'm really excited to talk about it with all of you guys, clearly, since I've been talking for 5 minutes straight already.
That's perfectly fine. No time limits here. You do whatever you want. But that being said, I do want to dig into what you just said. A few points of your story I think are going to be really fascinating. So I want to look into that. But first, I want to get Josie's opinion. Josie, why did you become an organizer?
Whew, this is a long question. So there is a lot there.
We have two
so
of
I'll
you
just
here.
go ahead.
We have two, Maddie
Okay.
and don't worry. Neo and Amanda, you can just take a break. Maddie and Josie got it from here. Go ahead, Josie, please.
Yeah.
I just talk a
I'll
lot,
try-
but Josie's a legit expert. So
I know it's fine. You're doing great, girl. You're crushing it. So for me, I got started in 2012, I knew I wanted to be a social person, probably back in the Navy. I remember there was a moment I was sitting in front of the reactor, and it's like Homer Simpson's reactors, where it got like numbers and like gauges and knobs and things like that. I was just a glorified Homer Simpson in the Navy. But I was sitting there and I was just like, out of the blue, I was like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. And the people in the space were like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. It's not this. And it's probably something to do with talking for a living. And I was like, that's something around what I did. So I thought I was going to do entertainment, but then I actually decided to get into politics from a random event. So this is how lightning strikes in politics and organizing. This happens all the time to people. And I know a lot of people who got into politics because of a random lightning bolt, basically, not literally, but figuratively, of course. So basically, I was walking through campus. I was getting my political science degree. And I saw this like a bunch of little pop-ups in the middle of our like, our square, I guess. And there was a bunch, all of the congressional candidates and congressional people were, no, sorry, all 5 actual congressional members of San Diego County were there. And I was like, oh, well, let me go meet the Congress people. So I walked over to them, and I remember the representative that I later ran against and forced to drop out in 2020. Little subcontext there, but I talked to her because she was my representative, and I was like, hey, I want to help you. She introduced me to the field director. They were already a shoe-in campaign, and I was like, great, I'll help. And he was like, great, you can be my volunteer deputy field director. And I was like, that sounds cool, let's do it. So I went, I knocked on doors, I understood phone banking systems, I did phone signing visibilities. I was just a student of the field director that was there. And it gave me the ability to start organizing other things. So when I learned those basic skills, and that's why I tell people to just work for a campaign. Doesn't matter if you like the candidate or not, figure out what the winning strategies are, because you're never going to work for a startup candidate and learn everything about campaigns that you need to know. It's just not possible, because a startup candidate doesn't know all the steps. So you should always look for a campaign that you think is probably a shoo-in to win, because that's easy. So after I did that, I was like, well, let me put these skills to good use. I'm going to go find an established candidate. And I found the school board candidate who was a shoo-in to win. He was the president of the school board at the time. And I was like, hey, I want to help you. I started volunteering for this person. And then they brought me on as campaign manager. And I learned how to drop yard signs, how to talk to consultants, how to fundraise, how to do all of the things that are required to win a campaign. We ended up winning that race by 68% overall, and it was a great start to my career. So I tried to run another city council campaign. It was a complete disaster. I actually left the campaign a month and a half in. I was like, you know what? I'm going to run myself. And I ran for city council because I was like, I knew the skills, how to do it. And when I ran for city council back in 2016, now I started back in 2012. I interned. I got an internship out of that campaign. I worked for the congresswoman back then. So I worked in DC for 3 months as well. So there's a step that I missed there. So after I ran for myself, that's when I started to get really entrenched in the politics, the relationship building, because once I stepped out as a candidate, everybody was like, target. Like, it was like, that's how it worked. It's like, you put yourself out there, and now you're one of the people on the chopping block, and you've become a player on the field, a piece on the board, however you want to use the metaphor. So when you're in that position, you then have to find your grit and courage and use the skills that you know as an organizer to beat all expectations. Now, people said that I wouldn't get more than 7% in that race. I got 17. The Democrat, yeah, I know. The Democrat that got the endorsement because I supported Bernie Sanders. I was on the Hillary train before I heard Bernie Sanders speak for the first time. And when I heard Bernie Sanders speak for the first time, I completely diverted my entire ideas of like, no, he speaks like I think. That's what I want in a representative. So when I openly came out for Bernie Sanders, that's when the Democratic Party establishment took their daggers out at me. Now, I lost the Democratic Party endorsement in the county by 1 vote. one vote in the endorsement process because somebody that was a Hillary crack got up and said, I don't know who's ready for city council, Josie or Bernie. And they made it into like this national thing rather than a local thing, which was completely wrong and disingenuous. Now, the Democrat I almost beat. The guy who got the vote, he only beat me by like 5 points, but that was only 2,000 votes. And the only reason he won was because he sold out, and now he's not in politics anymore because he sold out and lost his soul. So now that was what launched my organizing prowess to be able to campaign manage, to be able to start my own consulting firm. Now, mind you, I know this is a long story. I'll be done shortly. I promise. I'm getting to a point.
No, please.
Yeah. So now, before I went from city council to consulting, I actually went and worked for a nonprofit called the Fund for the Public Interest to be a national field a canvas director. So I could be in charge of teams that were sent door to door to raise money for things like the bees, things like finding lead in the water, stopping environmental rollbacks, and just learned issues and learned how to talk to people outside of politics. In that, I've probably knocked 10,000 doors personally. No, I take that back. Probably about 5,000 doors personally. But I also ran a strike team of about 30 people in the county, and we were raising more money than all the other cities at the time. So I was able to learn those skills as an organizer to then start my consulting firm. And then from there, I was able to now treat and train other organizers and other candidates how to run for office. The ability to organize didn't come from me naturally. I didn't get up one day and say, I'm going to run for office, damn it. I'm going to manage campaigns. I learned first. And one of the things that people forget when you talk about organizing is the amount of hard work it takes. It's like asking a pro bodybuilder, hey, I want to get that strong. And then the pro bodybuilder's like, well, get in the gym and work for 5 years and maybe you can be here one day. And somebody's like, no, I want it now. Right. And that's what a lot of organizers, and I hate to say this, but progressives in general think that there's an easy fix to doing things. I'll tell you right now, we're going to talk about alternative ways of connecting with people. There isn't one. I will tell you right now, the only way that you can win a campaign is knocking on doors, period. It doesn't matter if it's COVID. It doesn't matter what's going on in the world. You have to knock on doors. I learned this very quickly, and this is my knowledge, my wisdom. When I did a campaign for the firm where I was actually not for the firm, for the first campaign I was running, I was like, I hated canvassing. I hated it. I hated going door to door. I hated doing all of the process, the amount of volunteers, everything that it took to go into it. And then I came in with the mindset thinking, I'm going to do this differently. I'm going to do this differently. And when I found out that there is nothing else in canvassing, that's when I went and became a Fund for the Public Interest manager. And then when I did that, that's when I was like, if this is the only way I'm going to do it, I'm going to be best at it. So that's what my whole brand is visibility at the door. It's an army marching on every day, getting more and more territory. That's the only way you can organize. There is no shortcuts to it. And anybody that tries to sell you that, walk the other way and find a real candidate that knows how to win. And that's the reality of what organizing is. So it's the romanticization of organizing is a myth. There's nothing romantic about canvassing and going door to door. It is grunt work every day for maybe a moment of peace and satisfaction at the podium. That's it. That's it. You're fighting for one moment of victory at the end of a campaign. And if you cannot handle the hard hits along the way, get out of the work. Let somebody else learn the process. And I'm very, very cold about it. And I'm very, very hard about it. But like Maddie said, when she came into those doors the first time, she knew she had a passion for it. And I would hire Maddie in a heartbeat for a lot of things because she's been through the work. She knows what it's like. And when you find a true campaigner and a true organizer, it is a magical thing. It is an absolutely magical thing because you go through the ringer to get this experience, to be these skills. So yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this. And I have a lot of thoughts from praxis and 10 years of experience. So when it comes down to organizing, I want to be able to be there and help everybody get to the point where you can run for Congress like I did this last cycle.
Yeah.
Like that's the reality. And I
Josie,
will win when I run in 12 years.
Josie,
Oh yeah, you will.
you
I'm
have
ready. I'm done.
you have a lot of thoughts on this. I couldn't have told. Just it seemed like you were really quiet. It was hard to get anything out of you. But okay. All right. Thank you so much, Josie. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. And thank you for that springboard because you touched on lots of different things. So I wanted to go back, and we'll touch on a lot. We have a lot of time, so we'll have time to touch on literally everything. So I wanted to go back to what Maddie was saying. Maddie, like the part of your story that really grabbed me was when you were talking about that night in 2016, where you were emotionally crushed. I very much remember that night as well. I was sitting with my cousin who doesn't know anything about politics, right? We were watching the results come in, and well, okay, before we even get there, like months before, during the I think it was just after like the nominations, right? Like had been set, right? The people that they grabbed the nominations, and I remember
I was there. I was a delegate. So if you want to know more, I can tell you that too.
Sure. So I was having a conversation with someone, and they asked me, well, like, could Donald Trump actually have a chance? And I told them, once you're a major party candidate, you have a 50-50 shot, like at least, to become president. A lot of people didn't seem to understand that oh, okay, well, he's a joke, so it's not actually going to be an issue. So yeah, so a lot of people did not see this coming. So back to election night, I'm sitting with my cousin watching these things come in, and he doesn't know anything about politics. And so as the states are rolling in, and he's like, oh no, that one went for Trump. I'm like, yeah, it's fucking like Texas. Like, what? Yeah, sure, don't worry about it. It's like, and I was like, what? When I get upset, that's when you get upset. It's like, I'll tell you which states actually matter as they come in, all right? And they came through, and at first it's what you expect, the usual mix of states. And then was it North Carolina came in for Trump or something like that? One of those. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's not good, but we're still in there. We're still in there.
Yeah.
And the night kept rolling, the states coming in. I'm like, oh, okay, well, we're gonna have to get used to calling him President Trump. Just gonna have to like get used to those words coming out of my mouth because this is happening. Cut to the victory. Well, the victory or celebration for Trump, surprise one. They clearly were not prepared for that. And then on the other side, Hillary Clinton and what they had prepared for. So if you all remember, they were in New York, and they had they were in some sort of space that had like a glass ceiling, and they want to use like lasers, some sort of laser imaging to show the glass ceiling cracking and falling down. And I remember them showing the women, right, as this was happening, right? Like at first, they were going through all the same emotions that the rest of us were, and there were so many people who had brought up their daughters, right, mothers with their daughters, clearly waiting to watch this happen. And then a heartache at the end, the tears. And so there was a long-winded way of asking about like the passion that goes into organizing, because you put everything into this, right? When you're part of a campaign, these are just people who support as a campaign, right? But to be actually part of a campaign and everything that goes into it, over months and months working with individuals, maybe really believing in your candidate. I'm not sure. That's another question. Do you always believe in your candidate? That's another thing to talk about. And then disappointment. I mean, that's part of being a political operator, right? It's disappointment because sometimes you just don't win, right? So I want to talk about that, like that passion, like so that's what you felt before you got started, right, Maddie? And then afterwards, go ahead.
I mean, no, I had that. I went through a similar thought process as you when I was watching the results come in. I feel like I turned into, I forget what that guy from CNN is named, but he's the one with the big map, and he was always like, "Oh, we need this, and then this
John
county
King?
always goes blue." Yes, yeah. And so like maybe it was the guy they kept calling him like Map Daddy, because he had his like, his map, and he would get into all the like. So I turned into like a tinfoil hat where I'm like, oh, it's okay. We only need this, this, and this, and the results haven't come in from the urban centers, so we have a shot. I'm trying to go through this, and then you just see every possible avenue for Hillary to win just slowly deteriorate, and I just cry. I couldn't believe, I mean, like a lot of people, I couldn't believe it. And I wasn't like you where I was like, oh, it's a 50-50 chance. I call it me being naive. I just didn't think it was possible that that many people would vote for someone so like truly despicable. And it just crushed me. And I can't explain it. I was heartbroken that night, but then I decided, I'm like, I'm going to give myself tonight to be sad. I'm going to give myself that because we've just experienced something fucking terrible. But starting tomorrow, I am not a victim. I am not going to be a victim. I am going to do whatever I can to make sure that I never feel like this again, and that no one else has to feel like this again. Because as bad as it felt for me, I had just moved back from New York at the time. So I was living in my parents' house. I have it pretty good. But so many others don't, and had so much more on the line. And it's like, if I feel like shit, I can't imagine what they must feel like. So I was like, I owe it to everyone else to make sure that I can do that. And because so listen, I know you would never think it. I'm very much an introvert. People exhaust me. No, I'm serious. Like I'm very much more, I call myself like a social introvert, where it's like, I really love talking to people. I think people are fascinating. I love engaging with them. I can be charming, whatever. Like as Josie said, it's like you knock on enough doors, you meet enough people, you know how to persuade them. You know how to like key in on those things. But like I am very much more, I would rather like be at home. And just it doesn't come naturally for me, but I'm good at it. And I know that I have that ability, and not everyone does. So I was almost like, if I don't use this to do what I can to influence the results, then I'm doing myself a disservice, and I'm letting people down. And I want to be that person to move things forward, to push us in the right direction. And hopefully there are others like me who are having this exact same epiphany. And it just motivated me. I think the thing I posted back when I like posted on Facebook, which I don't anymore, is I said, what the Republicans don't realize is they just awakened a new generation of activists and organizers who just realize they can no longer sit on the sidelines, that the stakes are too high. And you know what? Maybe it's my privilege for only realizing just how high the stakes were in 2016 as opposed to earlier, because I guess my livelihood and quality of life weren't necessarily directly threatened in the way that they are for other, like for marginalized communities. So maybe that's my own like privilege of being a white lady, a nice white lady who comes from a upper middle class background. But that's why I started, and I just wanted to learn everything I could about it and be like, okay, well, what do I need to do? Like, what is it going to take? Because I want to do everything I can. And so I jumped into it head first. I learned as I went. Josie's right that like the best way to learn how to do it is to just jump into it, because someone can give you an outline of like, oh, here are some things to think about. Here is how you do this. Like, here are the steps to doing whatever. But until you like go face to face with voters and have to answer their questions, talk to them, make your case for your candidate or for, whatever it is that you're organizing for, like nothing can prepare you for that. Like just going out and doing it. And I'm going to be honest, like it's super awkward the first few times you do it, and that's okay. I would always tell this. So like I got so into the Warren campaign. We launched Get Out the Vote from my house. So my house for 3 weekends straight was filled with phone bankers with every couple hours, people coming into Canvas and training them and all that. Like, it was crazy. And I would tell everyone when this was their first time canvassing or their first time phone banking, I'm like, look, it is totally okay to be super awkward the first few times. I sure as shit was. But it's like anything else. You develop a muscle memory for it. And it just gets easier and easier. And you kind of just, it's like, you just kind of have to do like exposure therapy with it, where you just like go into it. And then once you get into it, and most of them were like, oh, well, I want to go with someone else. And I'm like, okay, I was the same way. And then eventually I was like, I really just want to go alone because like other people slow me down. I just need to like get through this list and like, you know, hit all these doors. So you get in a rhythm, you find what works for you, and everyone has their own style. And I mean, I got so into it. I was literally interviewed for like the evening news. I was interviewed for a radio segment, like a podcast thing that was on like national radio, because like I was like, just give me everything I can. And the campaign would, you know, call me or text me being like, hey, would you be up for doing just talking about your experience volunteering? And I was like, of course. Oh my God. Yes. Hopefully this will show other people like it's so easy. And if like a dummy like me can jump in head first and do it, like anyone can do it. It's just, and I don't know. And I met like so many wonderful people, including Amanda, by the way, who like we've been friends now for a while. And like she's partially to blame for me being on Discord because like she was the one that invited me to join Discord and had to explain to me what the fuck it was. And like my old ass, like trying to learn a new platform. But yeah, you meet so many incredible people. I hope to never feel that sad ever again. And like I scared my cats. As I had 2 cats at the time, and I was there sobbing on the floor, and they were just like, what is happening? Like, are you okay? Also, I don't care because I'm a cat. So yeah, that was my experience. Hopefully that
Okay.
sums up.
Yeah, I think it's funny that I got you on Discord. So I got it on Discord only for gaming and didn't consider it at all like political or anything like that. And then started watching Maddie on Twitch. Oh, buddy, hold on. Started watching Maddie on Twitch and then decided to get in too. So that's also organizing effectively, right?
Yeah,
So
relational organizing.
yeah, so there's lots of Oh, sorry, Josie. Do you have? Is that your
Yeah.
finger up for us? Okay, go ahead, please.
Oh yeah. So I wasn't surprised. I actually posted a photo in the little shared chat. That photo was taken in July 28th. I was at convention. I took that photo myself. You see them holding a map showing Hillary getting her complete butt kicked by Donald Trump, and we all knew it was going to happen. I was in August talking to people and going on podcasts talking about what we should do about a Trump presidency because it's inevitable. I was going out telling people like, hey, like, buckle up, get ready to do it. Like, this is it. Get out of your fever dream. Trump's gonna win. Like it was like I got a lot of flack for it. A lot of people were pretty mad at me for being like, Josie's spreading like Hillary's gonna lose because she's a bittered Bernie crap. And I'm like, no, it's not about Bernie. I promise. It's about that Hillary's a bad candidate and she was going to lose. And I knew because I was a campaign manager for a small city council member in northern San Diego. When I started seeing the results at the local level being as atrocious as they were, I was like, this is a bad sign. This is not good. I saw the data. I was afraid. I was already so sold on the fact that we were getting a Trump presidency. And when he won, I was like, yep, that's it. Wrap it up. Like, it's over. Like your campaign is over too, man. Like the one that I was running, I was like, it's done. Like, party, your family's here. Like it was one of those situations in that November. And one of the things that Maddie brought up that I thought is important to bring up here is the cohort of people that came in after 2016, because there's a very interesting thing that happened. Like I said, I was at convention in 2016. And I'm not trying to say that to brag, but I'm saying that as a point of
You
like
can brag too.
understanding.
That's fucking cool.
Yeah, it's pretty
I
cool.
know. So thanks. I appreciate it. I was a Bernie delegate for Bernie twice. So the thing is, I saw and organized back in 2015 for Bernie. When my dog is like gonna knock down my ring light. Hold on. Hey, go away, go. Sorry. I saw the ring light wobbling. I'm like, you better not knock that down. But anyways, so I organized with people who saw Bernie, excuse me, that saw Bernie. Let me get water. Blah. I swear I'm
yourself,
okay.
girl.
All right. I
Pace
know.
yourself.
I'm thinking about like it gave me those the PTSD vibes from that fucking convention. It was terrible. But anyways, it was awful. There was like so many stories about Hillary people attacking Bernie people. I jumped in front of a Marine's punch with that because like he was gonna punch out a Hillary person because the Hillary person was provoking this Marine. It was like crazy.
Oh,
But
no.
anyways, it was a madhouse. So I organized with people who got in politics for the first time because of Bernie Sanders. I was organizing with people who were like 50 years old that were like, never voted in my life before, but Bernie says the right things. And like just this eclectic group of people from all races, all classes, all generations. And I've never seen anything like it. Now, I was only in politics for 2 years or 3 years at the time when that all started. 4 years at the time. Geez. So I was already in this process. So what happened after all the marches and all the feel the burn memes and all those people that put their income, their energy, everything on the line, raising money for Bernie delegates to go to Philadelphia because they made sure to choose expensive hotel rooms to try to block Bernie delegates from even voting. There were so many things that were happening that we raised over almost $1 million in our own funds as a community to ensure that everybody got to convention with full paid hotel rooms and making sure that we had camera equipment to capture everything. Like that's how amazing our community was at that time. Now, after the convention, I call it the first great like where people just fell off completely and gave up all hope. At least a third of the people were there, the Bernier busters, the people who were protesting with the signs saying, you need to stand with us, you need to stand with us. The dim exiters and those people all left the party in waves. And it was very scary. And I was like, don't leave. We need you to vote for the people who've been fighting for us. And they're like, no, the politics suck. The Democratic Party is a duopoly. We're not going to do this anymore. And I'm like, you're literally just giving up your jersey and you don't want to play the sport anymore. Like, you need to get back in the game. However, there was a glimmer of false hope. And the false hope, it was the cohort that Maddie is a part of. The people who didn't see Trump coming, the people who are like, I should have done more rather than just put a bumper sticker on my car, right? That cohort of people came in and matched almost the people who left the party, the most energized people, the people who were standing on freeways for months at a time, every day, just dangling a sign, voting for Bernie, like the old school, campaigners. Those people all left the party. So a lot of the energy, and guess what? Most of those people were people of color, by the way, because of the fact that they couldn't sustain another 2-year cycle of not getting the incomes and wages, the amount of pay cuts. People lost their jobs because they were so vocal for Bernie in a non-political climate. Because if you think about before 2014, how often did you hear about politics? Even when Obama was running, it was not even as crazy as it got when it got to 2016. So people, so because of that energy shift, like this entire group of people came in, and then another 2 years happened where you had most of the people of color, most of the Black and Indigenous people get out of the party. So then you had an entire cohort of people like, now I'm ready to volunteer for another 2 years, or 4 years, hoping to actually get another victory. And they learned how to organize and they did a really good job. And then all of a sudden Bernie lost again. And then we got Biden, because a lot of people got turned off by that. And they say, yep, the party's corrupt, it's over, I'm out. And then we had another great walkout of the organizers and the people that we have. So now we're left with a skeleton crew. There are people like Maddie, people like Amanda, people like myself, and is it Nogia? Is that how you say Neogia? Is that what?
Neo Gaia. Like
Neo
Mother
Gaia. I'm so
Gaia.
sorry. I apologize. I did not hear you say your name.
Mother Gaia.
Neo Gaia,
yeah.
yeah.
Neo
Gaia
Gaia.
is
I
the Greek
apologize.
goddess.
I'm just gonna
I'm
call
really-
you
I don't
Neo.
Yeah, I'm
Like the
really
one.
bad with names. I'm really bad with names. But you're another one of those people who have stood there to get resilient and be able to stand the test of time. So now we're at a skeleton crew. And all we can do as organizers is to train the next cohort of people without the false promise that this is going to be a quick win. Because the reason that the progressive movement is almost a non-existent right now, in a sense, is because all of the people that came in with the cohort of 2018 were sold the blue wave promise, were sold the fiction of the AOC win to think that anybody was able to do it and that politics has changed for the better. Like, this is a prime example of how we're going to change things for the better. It's American mythology to think that an AOC can happen to anybody. AOC was an organizer for 4 years before she ran for Congress. She had connections with Justice Democrats and had $350,000 rain on her head, not by random coincidence. That's why I hate the documentary Bringing Down the House, because it's a lie. And it pissed me off because it gave a lot of people false hope and naivete that basically ruined and poisoned the well of new, naive, good, optimistic organizers to think that they were going to be able to survive and do this massive change and get Bernie Sanders to be the president, and everything was going to be better. And so we salted the earth and people decided to not come back. And now we're left with the most professional organizers being the people who are able to weather working for free and working for starvation wages for 6 years. And guess what that turns out to be? Mostly white, influential leaders of the progressive movement. Thus, we are now getting what I have coined, the white progressive movement. Just like the feminist movement became.
You are singing
So-
my song
I have
right
to.
now.
I'm sorry.
So that's my point. I'm going to stop there.
Neo, and then Amanda.
I just have to dispute some things that you said. Okay, so one, I'm not saying that you're saying that, but I'm not white. I'm Latina, and I'm from the ghetto. Actually, I'm not. I don't have any middle
I'm
class
Latina
background
too.
whatsoever.
But I'm not I got kicked out of the progressive movement. So just
But anyway, I was just gonna say. So I just want to dispute some things that you said, because when you were saying, "Oh, all these new people that were activated with Bernie," okay, I'll just give you my spiel, because I did vote for Bernie Sanders in 2016, but I absolutely did not feel the burn. I did not at all, because here's why. So I was like an anti-capitalist, like identifying as an anti-capitalist, like way back in the ancient days of like 2007, 2008. Like when Obama was running, I was like, I'm an anarchist, whatever. I mean, I voted, but like, anyway. But so when Bernie turns up in 2015 and there's all this excitement about him, I'm like, this is interesting. But I identified it as a cult of personality. So the thing is, just because these people were enthusiastic about Bernie does not mean the left has a big problem in general with like people burning out. Like, and I've been here for the long run, so I feel like I have something right going on. But like, I as an anarchist was very suspicious. I was like, I don't know, these people are really invested in this one person, and if they don't get what they want, they're gonna like freak out and leave. And it's like, that's just not how it works. And I know that's what you're saying, but just like when you felt all this energy from these people, I was very suspicious. I was like, these people are not. Sorry, my cat's making a lot of noise.
Cat in the background.
I was just like, these people are not. I don't know. Like, I don't trust these people. Like, I'm not saying. On the other hand, I will say that Bernie Sanders and other events around that time changed my ideas about like I used to be an anarchist, and I worked on local campaigns, like I've said. Like local, especially like direct democracy, like ballot initiatives. But I was really suspicious about putting your efforts behind a politician. But then I saw at least some part of the Bernie Sanders movement like did translate into like at least social Democrats. And I was like, okay, that's who we can work with. The people who stuck around and were not just like, I didn't get everything that I wanted and I'm leaving. But I just was very like, I don't know. There were a lot of idealistic young people. I get it. Great. When Bernie ran the first time, but I was not. I was like, I've seen this road. I was like, I see a cult of personality. I see what this is gonna turn into. And I just have to say, like, for all the people talk about, like, I'm not saying he didn't activate whole bunch of new people. And Bernie rode the wave of Occupy to make socialism like a word that we can talk about. Like, it's a thing people talk about now. It's not so weird like it was when I was a socialist in 2007. But just like, I just knew in this primary in 2020, I supported Warren. That's Maddie got me into Twitch politics and to the political side of Twitch. Otherwise, I would never have come on this side of Twitch. But just like when in the primary in 2020, I was just like, you know what? I was like, he's not gonna win the nomination because he's not even gonna beat what he got in 2016, and that's the limits of like, I'm glad that he's helped switch the Overton window. That was really important. That's what I'm like, dude. You switched the Overton window. You helped build a little bit of left politics make it more mainstream. Help prop up people like AOC and Rashida Tlaib and I forget who the new people are in the last cycle.
Ilhan
but
Omar,
like,
yeah,
all these other people. But it was just like I didn't see those people in the same way that you did, Josie. I was like, oh, the idealists who are gonna freak out, like. So anyway, but the other thing too is that I'm from like I said, from the ghetto, and my neighborhood is like majority Latino where I'm from, but like historically Black. Oh, anyway, I saw like in the primary in 2020, I was like, okay, if Bernie's gonna win this nomination, this is the ground zero, like where you get the most voters if you are a socialist, the ghetto, like that's, or like poor areas, working class areas. And I just didn't know. I mean, I obviously saw people who were like pro Bernie and stuff, but I just did not see the enthusiasm that was required from where I was. I was like, this guy's not going to win. Like, it's just not going to happen. There's no way.
But that's what I'm talking about. Like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, communities of color didn't get behind Bernie because the progressive movement was so focused on a few niche issues for themselves, using bad language like Medicare, when most people of color hate Medicare, and completely changed the narrative from healthcare for all to Medicare for all, which pissed people off because they're like, no, I don't want that for everybody. I hate it myself. Why do I want that for my friend down the street? Like, that's what ended up happening. And I'll tell you right now is the progressive movement still, as much as you don't like Bernie Sanders or maybe don't believe in him, he's still like the father of the progressive movement that exists around us. And what that is. Okay, it is.
No,
oh God.
no.
Yeah. Like
Okay, but Josie's not
Workers of the
wrong
world
here.
unite,
Like, I mean,
right? No.
Josie's not wrong at all. I mean, if you look at all the data and stuff,
Yeah.
obviously it's not true in every single part of the U.S., which is, I mean, why Trump won, right?
It's pretty regional. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing about like Sanders and Trump and everyone like waking up and whatnot, I just want to highlight the fact that Republicans are constantly knowing their target, knowing their audience, and knowing their messaging, which is why they continually win. And so I guess my point to this to add is that when people want to talk about Trump and him talking to, the Proud Boys and things like that, and saying that, Trump doesn't know that he's talking to these people. They know exactly who they're talking to. They know their audience, and he knew his message, which is why he was so effective because of that.
Yeah. I think, well, that touches on something that I've always felt about just like the progressive movement in general, but I think it is pervasive in just regular Democrats, is that we lose the messaging battle every time. And it's because we like step on our own dick. Oh, look, I love it, Josie. But yeah, like it's so frustrating because especially when you think about what a progressive platform looks like and actually how popular all of those ideas are. Like, progressives have a popular platform, but somehow we keep getting in our own way. And we keep losing this messaging battle because we get so fixated on the little things. Whereas the GOP is just, they're great at having this unified front and using simple messaging on a few core issues that they just fucking hammer. And I think sometimes we do ourselves a disservice.
So is it a unified front on the right? Or is it that
recently, yeah.
Okay, so I disagree with you here.
Okay.
Because the right is a lot more fractured. There are a lot more interests, right? Different interests. Now, they're like motivates them all together is that's another question. But like they do have different interests. So there is like a Christian conservative, like right, and the things they want, right? They want maybe restricting abortion, maybe return to the traditional family, respect for the nuclear family, whatever the fuck it is that they want, right? They want that type of stuff. There are those who literally just want lower taxes and don't give a fuck how that happens, right? There are others who are there because gun rights. Gun rights, you got me, right? It's actually more of a fractured coalition. Now, Trump was able to combine them all by speaking to like by speaking a very malleable message, right? That he would literally, when he was doing his rallies, he would literally A/B test his messaging, right? You remember this, right? He would say one thing, and then the crowd like would sort of respond, "Oh, okay." All right, then he would say the opposite, and the crowd would cheer. I was like, "Oh, okay, well, that's what I'm doing," right? So he just kind of just formed his campaign, and created his platform like on the go, right? And it just happened to bring out the most hateful individuals in the Republican Party, because that's what got the biggest cheers, right? There was even he had comments, if I'm remembering this correctly, I could be misremembering this, but like I remember he had like comments on like gay marriage, right? That like he didn't like much care. I was like, oh, that's fine, like I don't care so much, right? But then he started to move away from that because his audience wasn't for that. So I just feel like the coalition is much more fractured on the right. And I want to say another thing on that in terms of the left, something that Neil Gaia brought up, talking about how people get burnt out all the time, right? And this works to what Maddie was saying, right? I think what you're describing are people who are in there for like almost a cult of personality type thing, right? They see a charismatic leader who has a great message, and that's what they're focused on. They're focused on pushing that rather than the large movement behind it. Rather than, especially if you're new to politics, I think you're even more susceptible to this. Understanding that this individual is simply an avatar, an arbiter to get across your message, your policies, right? And you do everything you can to raise them up and put them into office. But then it doesn't work out because that's the way it is. But not understanding that there is a larger movement happening, that there's a larger struggle that goes by decades, right? Trying to get these policies moved, but like if all you see is this one individual person, right, and you're putting all your hopes in them rather than the larger message, larger struggle, then yeah, you're gonna get burnt out, right? It's like,
Yeah.
we failed. So it doesn't surprise me. I feel like that's less happens on the right. So to go back to Maddie, I feel like that happens less on the right. That there's so many movement conservatives that are worried about the larger policy implications, right? And that they're able to shrug these things off. Maybe it's just me looking at that from the outside, but it feels like to me that for at least the ones involved in the party, in the Republican Party, that they get it, So.
I don't think you disagreed with Maddie at all in any of that. Go ahead, Josie.
I think he did.
Oh.
And the
Okay,
thing
go
is,
ahead.
like, yeah, a QAnon supporter and the least conservative Republican probably voted for the same person.
Yeah.
And a communist and a Democrat probably didn't vote for the same person. That's why the Democrats are weak, and that's why the Republicans are stronger, regardless of what issues that they support. Whatever the issues that they support, the Republicans will always beat the crap out of us for strategy reasons, because they understand the party dynamics and the team sport dynamics of politics. And because the nuanced conversation happens all the time, and the Democratic movement's always being split in half between like apathy and like hoping somebody get it, like that's the struggle that Democrats have, is apathy versus like trying to get some people to vote. Like that's really all the Democrats have, because the Democrats have done such a poor job messaging why they should vote for their team. And that's why the Republicans are unified, more unified than we could ever thought possible. The fact that they ousted their leadership for the support of Donald Trump. Like, they understand the game at a level of like, no, we're just going to win, because if the voters are still voting for Trump, then we're going to keep sticking with Trump because he's going to give us the Republican votes. They don't care about abortion. They don't care about trans rights. They don't care about gun control. They'll dump all of that in a second if it knew it got them more votes.
Right.
You know?
Hold on, that's the party.
Right.
Hold on, that's different from the party will eject that. You're exactly right. I think our points here aren't too different, but the party will eject that the moment we saw that when it came to like the fight over the taxes, right? The tax cut. None of that other stuff mattered. The point was like, okay, now we've got what we want, right? The party did, right? Now we got what we want. Now we can unify over this message of getting these tax cuts, even though their base didn't even want that, right? Like, their base found it extremely unpopular. We see that that they are, that when it comes to their messaging, right, that you can unite them over things like bigotry, honestly. Like on the right, you can unite them over these things, and they will drop these other issues, right? These issues will just go away; they'll disappear until they accomplishes one policy goal, right? I don't think our messaging is too different here. So you're saying like, well, they all voted for the one person. Yeah, I agree, because I think they're on the right one. There's more respect for hierarchies. Like, that's another thing, right? Like, embedded in
Definitely has an impact, yeah.
whole ideology is a respect for hierarchies. And there's understanding that, like, and I think they worked on this for decades, understanding that we can change the rules. Our messaging may not be popular, but we can literally change the rules, change the referees, right? So on the Republican side, what they'll do is they understand that we have to work from the ground up. So it doesn't matter what it is, run a person in that race. Do you know what I'm talking about? Run a person in that race and slowly change the rules. And this includes like the federal judiciary, right? Like, we'll change the rules even though we aren't popular. We'll gerrymander, right? To make it so that it doesn't matter if you get 50 plus 1% of the vote, right? In terms of Congress, will still take the House, right? I'm sorry, I'm like a little scattered here, but do you understand what I'm trying to go for, Josie?
Yes, but I think at the end of the day, like, the tactics of like knowing your voter base is just like typical tactics of any strategist. It's like understanding that stuff. But at the end of the day, I just think it's more sinister than that, Prime. I think it's just pure and utter power. Because like, that's really what it is. They value power over everything else. They don't care about the issues. They don't care about any of those type of things. So at the end of the day, it's like, because they care about power and being able to like own the libs and say, haha, we got a Republican in office, they'll vote for any R on the ballot. And I know this because I'm originally from Texas too. I could have a conversation with a family member for a whole day, and then they'll be like, you know what? I think you're right. I think I should vote Democrat. And then they'll watch one news segment on Fox News, and everything that I did is completely ruined.
Maddie?
Like, I don't
sorry.
even waste time with Republicans anymore, actually.
Maddie?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to, well, so a few things I wanted to address. I think what we did see with a lot of people, and we see this with younger people who got involved, and I think a lot of that came from Bernie. So I don't know if it's specific to Bernie or just because he had a much larger like base of volunteers that were younger. But there was some disillusionment because I think their theory of change was very much like it's this like grand sweeping thing where it's like all of a sudden everything will be different if we just get this like once we elect Bernie, then that is going to change everything. Or if we only, and so they have that sort of mindset, which I don't necessarily think is grounded in the reality of our political system. One example that I think is fantastic that came out of this past cycle was Georgia. I mean, what we saw in Georgia is the product of what over a decade of Democratic organizing and doing it at a highly local level. I mean, that was one thing that Stacey Abrams stressed when she founded Fair Fight. If you haven't read her book, oh God, I'm blanking on the name, but it's fucking incredible. And it also talks a lot about organizing. Like that Fair Fight had a chapter in every single county where they were specifically working hand in hand with those county officials, community leaders in those counties to do mass voter registration, to engage with voters, to make sure that voters knew that if they had trouble voting or their ballot was rejected or they were turned away from a polling place for whatever reason, they knew who to call so that they could work on that and be there like in the community working with these folks. And I mean, we saw the benefits of it, but like it's still such a like we won Georgia but by such a tiny margin. But that shows, I feel like that could be used as a blueprint for the type of organizing that works. And for like the fact that, look, this wasn't something that just changed overnight. This wasn't like, oh, we had this one incredible politician and then everything was different. It's like, no, that's the result of people organizing in the reddest counties, even when they knew their candidate didn't have a chance in hell of winning. But what they're doing is it's the long run stuff. It's like, but if I organize here now, that's something that we can build on in the future so that someday maybe we do have a fighting chance in this county. That's stuff that you see happening. I mean, I say you want to meet the most talented and hardworking and fucking scrappy Democratic organizers. It's organizers doing this in red districts because they're the ones that have to hustle. They don't like here in San Francisco, you don't have to do too much like in the general election to elect a Democrat. Will they be a progressive or someone that like cares about social justice, whatever? Maybe not. They might be a little corporate, but like people, I know I have a lot of friends who are organizers in Texas specifically, who work for Texas Dems, and they have been grinding at it for over a decade to put us in throwing distance within a stone's throw of like having a chance in a statewide election. So like that is where I think that's something that maybe people who feel disillusioned with politics or they saw someone they love like Bernie, like just not get that national support that maybe they were hoping for, and they think, oh well, everything's bullshit and fuck the Democrats and fuck whatever. Like, because change takes time, but with sustained organizing, with persistence, with like working in tandem with other organizers who know the work, like Josie was talking about in her opening statement, like they know just how much of a ground game you need to make long-term change, to change the tides of an election. Like it's the long game. It's a bummer because we'd love to see stuff happen right now, but like that's also why we stress focus local, because when you focus local like that, it builds on itself.
Amanda, then you.
Yeah, I kind of disagree, but I haven't really looked at the data coming in from Georgia. I haven't really looked at politics very much recently after getting off the runoff election, simply because I haven't stopped organizing since 2017, and I'm going off my point here, but I think that I totally think obviously that the long run is where it's at, and planting seeds is how we are going to affect change going forward. But I think Georgia was won because of Trump in a way. I think that Trump, getting into it with the Republicans turned off a lot of Republican voters, and so a lot of Republicans didn't show up, and more people of color ended up turning out this year. And I think that's directly related to the $2,000 checks that were constantly being messaged. And so I'm nervous that false sense of hope that we saw with Georgia, it's going to happen again. People are going to get disengaged because the messaging with the $2,000 checks.
Well, I agree with that.
Yeah, like people didn't realize that, yes, $2,000 checks, but when we were talking about the money going out, people didn't realize that that wasn't going to happen in the first 100 days. Only people that are involved in politics knew that it going out when he, went into office on the 20th of January, that it took time, that there's this whole process. And so a whole bunch of Georgians who showed up to vote did so in their economic best interest, and then ended up having to wait. And so I just think that, I don't know.
So Amanda, I love what you brought up about Georgia. Georgia is fascinating, and this victory lap that Democrats have been taking, I feel like, is highly premature. Right? This reminds me of, it wasn't Georgia, it was the other southern state. Was it Mississippi or Alabama? It was maybe
South
Alabama.
Carolina.
It was the one with the judge who was running for Senate, but then he found out that he got banned from. He was he had an interest in young women, right?
Roy Moore.
Yeah, Roy Moore. And I always forget which state he came out
Alabama.
of. Alabama. It was Alabama. Okay, right. But like, he was defeated there. He was defeated by the Democrat, right? And it's like, oh, there's a turning point. Well, no, you had an extraordinary case, an absolute extraordinary case in which the Republican candidate was just a mess, right? You had extraordinary turnout on the other side because so many people were like, I do not want to send a potential predator, right, from Alabama. They already say all kinds of terrible things about Alabama. Let's not send a fucking predator to Alabama. So massive turnout for this one thing, right? And they got him. They got him. But on the other side, the Republicans were also fired up. They just barely lost. Like, with all that terrible candidate, they just barely lost. And then I believe he got voted out the next round, the Democrat.
Well, they kind of knew, yeah. Even though Doug Jones is a fucking incredible candidate, but like, yeah.
But the point is,
that's
then
the point.
moving back to Georgia.
Oh,
Georgia also an extraordinary case, right? Again, the fear of Trump, the fact that previously Stacey Abrams got robbed. They all saw it was very public. She got robbed out of the governorship, right? And that so many black people felt disenfranchised. So in that extraordinary circumstances, we got those senators. Great, but. Like, will those same dynamics hold after that? Will next time?
Not
will
at
we
all.
still have that? I don't see it. I don't see it at all. So I think you're all on the same page here. So we'll go to
Like,
Neil.
that's what I mean.
Okay, sorry.
I was like,
Sorry.
okay, sorry. So I just want to reframe things for a second, because okay, because the left loves to okay, let me rephrase this. The American left is so used to losing that we can't even celebrate when we win. Basically. I'm just going to reframe this a little bit. It was way too close. Don't get me wrong. In 2020, everything was way too close for comfort. But we won. We got these incredible victories in Georgia. The reason I raised my hand earlier, I wanted to ask, who here phone banked for the Georgia Senate races? I did. And I didn't get involved in the campaign otherwise because I was being very COVID cautious, but I was like, I'll call Georgia, and we pulled it out of the hat. Now, the reason I think I wanted to say that Georgia is not Alabama, there's a bunch of reasons, exactly what you were saying, Prime. First, I gave money to Stacey Abrams in 2000. Right now I'm unemployed. I've been unemployed for 18 months. But when I had a job back in the day, I have a full-time job. In 2018, I wasn't working as an organizer because I had a full-time job. And I sent money to Stacey. I was like, wow, she's doing really well. They need my money in this, so they have a chance. And she really almost got there. So it's not just pulling out of a hat with Doug Jones. They built many years. It's like what Maddie was saying earlier. It's been building this infrastructure for many years. And I'm going to put in the voice chat and the chat in Twitch. I, in 2016, saw something on Brookings Institute about what America's changing in terms of race. And it had this map of what what millennials and post-millennials, what states they're the majority of people of color. In Georgia, the majority of people under 30 are not white. Now, that doesn't mean demographics are destiny, but there's many reasons why Georgia is not Alabama, and there's real potential. It's a purple state now. It's not a blue state. It's a purple state.
No, see, that's just no. So it doesn't matter who. like the demographics of the people that end up not voting. And that's my whole point, is that so many people showed up for this election because they were voting in their economic best interest, and they're not going to do that again because they are totally discouraged with the entire process of getting their checks, which were not $2,000. We failed at the messaging there, if not flat out lied, to be quite honest. I worked the Georgia election, and I can't like go into too many details. People joke that I worked for the CIA because of how I can
We
talk
signed
about
an NDA. We
it's like,
tried.
but like
we
a really
tried
really extensive one. Like I
to
am
get
not like
information.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
She won't
like
do it.
that literally, like the one thing that I can say is that like that was the most effective campaign that I'd ever worked on, and it's because of the strategy involved in getting people to vote in their economic best interest. Like if Democrats could coalesce around the economic best interest and like actually do things when they get into office, that I mean, there's so politics and campaigns are so multifaceted. Like there's so many different things, you know, that go into this, and demographics matter, like everything matters. But I think that, I don't know, I'm just
Can I interrupt? I'm just gonna say,
Yeah.
you know, I just want to talk about, because you were mentioning economic interests, like it's so I feel like the left got really. I understand why. I understand it was popular messaging strategy, and I understand why this happened, especially in the online left. But the left really got like bogged down in these like, we just are gonna give everyone $2,000 checks. Fine, that's great. That was necessary. But like I mentioned, I've been unemployed for 18 months. You know how I've survived? Because of the unemployment benefits I've been getting for the last year from the COVID pandemic. And it's just really been interesting. The Democrats have definitely messed up in not being like, we've helped like, I don't know what the current number of unemployed people is, but they helped over 30 million people pay their bills. But it's just funny, like, because I guess we're only 10% of the population that was unemployed during COVID, like, people just kind of forgot that I guess because we're just in our houses and unemployed and living our lives.
Also, that
like,
are
in our asylums,
unemployed
they
and
forgot
like
about.
collect unemployment because like
Okay,
there's
that's a whole other issue.
difference, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, but I just want to say, I feel like the Democrats did mess up with, like, it's like when people are talking about it, it's like, well, even if I wasn't like already a raging lefty, it's like, oh wow, they actually helped me. Like I actually have my own place that I rent and survived the last year. Like they should have really gone on that, but it's just funny because I get the disappointment around the $1,400 check, so that was bullshit. But like that they went down or whatever. But just like I feel like the left, because of all the majority of the left is working, I guess. They just didn't see all this stuff. There was all this stuff in the COVID relief packages. This is why like Biden and Harris were going around the country being like, we did all this stuff for you because like there was a lot of targeted relief. Like I've been getting food stamps and like actually everyone right now, I don't know about now, but the last couple months, everyone who's getting food stamps, even if you qualify for $10 of food stamps, you get the full amount for yourself for like $200, $300. So there's all this stuff that happened that they just didn't like do a good job of like being like, actually we did help poor people. Not everyone, not as much as it should have, but like it just, I don't know, especially the Twitter left, man. Everyone was just like, we only care about $2,000 checks. I get why that happened, but like,
don't take your cues from leftist
Twitter.
Twitter. That's like not real life. And the majority of them like have never actually organized and like don't know what it is to actually do the work on the ground to like implement change, whatever. So yeah, this is also to the chat and audience, whoever, like Twitter leftists, like it's good. Sometimes it can help you because you're like, oh, I'm learning about different issues or I'm getting someone's take on things, but like never for 1 second believe that like that is what like these people, that's whatever they are saying is going to somehow be like how we influence policy in this country or how we move things forward, because it very much is not. And those people are extremely online, and it just, you kind of, depending on who they follow too, it can be like an echo chamber where they kind of egg each other on. But yeah, one thing I do want to say really quickly as well, like one thing that frustrates me, and I think this ties together what most people, like what everyone here is saying, is that like, while I think it was a combination of factors that delivered Georgia to the Democrats, including that like sustained organizing over the course of many years. However, what frustrates me more than anything, and I'm sure you guys feel the same way, is that the Democrats are shit at doing something with their power once they actually get it. And that, I think, and that speaks also to what Amanda was talking about, where it's like there are people that showed up because this was like a historic election with a historically bad opponent, and a lot on the line because we were in the middle of a pandemic, everything else. So the Democrats ran on this platform of saying like, well, this is the change we need. Like, it's been garbage, and you know, people's lives are at risk. So put grown-ups back in the room, and that's all well and good, but like the Democrats get so, it's like they walk on eggshells as soon as they get power because they're so terrified of losing it, when they don't realize that if they don't actually do something, if they don't make people's lives materially better, then all those people who were like formerly disenfranchised who showed up are not going to show up again, because you are just proving that you are part of the status quo. You're not actually implementing change. And that really frustrates me, because like we need to have some wins, like some big wins that we can point to that are different than, you know, just, I think it has to be something that we own. And we say, no, this was us. This was our idea. It wasn't something where it's like, oh no, you know, we ended up coming back with like 10,000 concessions and compromise so that we could barely get something through. Like, we need to be bold at this point, especially when like fucking voting rights are on the line.
This is so
because
beautiful.
like,
I love it. I love everything you're saying.
Yeah.
No, I mean you crushed it, and I'm curious what the other have to say on this. I've been talking about this constantly, saying that the Biden administration is dropping the ball. Right, the legendary turnout because of the threat of Donald Trump. Right, again, right on a macro level, legendary turnout. And the promise that things will be different. But if you actually do not deliver something that you can say, this is what we did, we delivered to you, and something that you saw, like whether you're involved in politics or not, this affected your life, this made your life better, right? This is something we did. The best they have, I think, is the COVID response. I think that's actually
ending COVID.
Yes, I think they actually have a good case there, right? But like,
it's only been 120 days.
Yeah, I know.
Like, you guys gotta chill.
No.
You gotta chill.
I'm saying,
like, it's 120 days, everybody.
No. I get you.
Is that really 120 days?
That's it.
I'm saying, okay. But okay, so the only problem is, I'll just say
yeah, but it's also summer.
Is that it seems like they're not positioning themselves to deliver, right? Because what changes from now? You're saying 120 days, and you're right, Josie, right? But what do you see in the future, in the next 2 years, that will change from right now? If the filibuster does not drop, right? If we don't get that out of the way, then nothing gets passed, right? We've seen this playbook happen previously with President Obama, right? And then what happens in the midterms? How do you convince these people to come out again and actually show up? So please tell me.
Okay. So first off, I think we have to change a fundamental way we look at the presidency. I think that we, as Americans, do this a lot, and it's no offense to anybody here, is that we assume that the president has this like tome of things that they're like passing at a time, and that's the ones that have to do it. Now, President Biden's the most progressive president we've ever had in American history, and we never even thought that was possible with him. Right. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, and let me explain why, Prime. I'm not talking about the words that the man says. I'm talking about the administration that he is a part of. I agree with you 100%. So you got to look at it like this. The president,
low, but it's true.
The president has no control over the way the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, depending on who it is, pushes that president into those directions. So let me explain. Biden has surrounded himself with people who are part of the machine that are actually pushing people to the left and pushing policy to the left. Let me explain. We actually have a voice in the White House that like trans equality, right, actually speaks and briefs the president on a weekly basis about equality rights, okay? That never existed. And the only reason that exists is not because Joe Biden said, hey, I want to talk to the trans people. It's because he put somebody in charge to say, hey, we should talk to the trans people. So the apparatus itself, regardless of who sits inside of that vehicle, is going to shove the president to that direction. Now, if Bernie Sanders won the presidency, we would be complaining about how he's not progressive enough because the machine around him wouldn't allow him to go as far as he wanted to go as well. So we have to look at it at the ideas of, look, Kamala Harris said some pretty effed up stuff in Guatemala the other day. She said, don't come here and all that type of stuff. And it was a huge faux pas. But you know what? Kamala Harris probably has no freaking control over how the actual border situation is going to be handled, because she's nothing more than a figurehead and the vice president of the United States. Now, is it a problem that she said that? Yes, because she gave ammunition to other lefties, radical lefties, to not vote for the administration in the future. And that's the problem optically. Is it going to materially change anything on the border? No. I think what's going to end up happening is that policies are going to come forward. Like I said, only 120 days. They haven't even got to the docket yet. And this is the problem that I see on the left as a whole. We are never happy and it's never fast enough. Yes, the world sucks. The world is on fire. And we can only pass so much. Prime, you're shaking your head no, but how much government work have you ever done?
No, hold on. Don't do that to me. Hold on. Don't do that to me.
I'm
no,
just
don't do that to
saying.
me. No, don't need to do that to me. I understand perfectly how the government works, right? And you didn't listen.
But you really think we can
did not
have
listen
the
to what I
policies
said.
and like?
You didn't listen to what I said. What did
Because you
I
were
say?
saying that you said that how are the Democrats going to deliver on any of the promises that they said, and if they don't do so, then they're going to lose it in the future. I agree. If we don't do anything from the 120 days
not what I
today,
said.
then yes,
I mean, that's the first part. Excuse me, that was the first part of what I said. But like, then there was the second part of what I said,
which is
go
ahead. Go ahead.
I'm saying. And this is simple. This is the same argument I got into Destiny multiple times, right? It's like no one listens to this
don't
part.
Compare me with Destiny.
Hey, but you're making the same argument. You're making this exact same argument. Like, here it is. I understand. I perfectly understand that the presidency is limited. That well, to an extent. But he is part of the executive. Biden is part of the executive, not part of the legislator. I understand that he is not some sort of authoritarian that can simply push legislation through Congress because it was simply his force of will. I get that 100%, understand how the government works, right? But it seems like you're pretending like I don't, but I get this. Great. My point is whether you're positioning yourself for success. That's all my point is. Not that we don't already have everything on his campaign, all his campaign promises, all those plans on his website, that all those things haven't been passed, right? I am not delusional. I understand how the government works. All I'm asking, and this is all I'm asking, the one thing I've been asking is to position yourself for success in the future. If nothing changes, like in terms of the status quo within the Senate, right? And other things that are going on. If nothing changes, then all that those great policies that for instance, like that trans individuals talking about, that you had, like the trans advisor, right? None of that's going to get passed except by executive order, I guess, right? Like the point is, you have to actually get the legislation through. You have to get it through, right?
Let me clarify.
Just
let me respond.
Let me respond. Let me finish my point, then you can respond.
Yeah.
So all I'm asking is that, like, if not just the administration, because it's not just on Biden, right? But it's, like I said, the Democratic Party. So if the Democratic Party has no answer for this current dilemma, and it seems like they don't currently, I don't see it. If they have no answer to this current dilemma, that legislation will not get through. At least the big legislation that actually will make a difference in people's lives, that simply will not get through. Then you're setting yourself up for failure for 2022.
Okay.
Please.
Okay. Yes. First off, you're right. There's nothing we could do about the Senate because the Senate makeup is the Senate makeup, and it's not going to change for 2 years. And we have a midterms to deal with, and that's what we got to do. So when we look at policies and things that we can do, we can start bringing back a lot of the environmental protections and regulations that were slashed. We can actually do a tax policy that is actually going to change something. We just put in the Assistant Deputy Secretary of Health that is an actual trans woman that is going to bring VA surgeries to reality for trans people and actually get people the healthcare that they need. We have actual legislation that is being passed across every state that we're actually working on individually, because we actually have a few state houses that we need to win, and that will retain local seats in those areas. And the more state houses we get, the better chance that we have the Senate to be able to pass. Like, the fact of the matter is, the Republicans are going to have the same problem in the future as well. The question, and that's the problem, is the premise of your question, Prime. The premise of your question is flawed because you're looking at one problem that is the hardest American problem that we can solve because we don't have the votes to do it. No matter what we can do, Joe Manchin is not going to help us get rid of the filibuster. We're not going to have the Republicans that are going to make us get rid of the filibuster. There is no material thing we can do to get rid of the filibuster, and we cannot forget about that. And the answer is, if we don't pass any big legislation, of course I want big legislation passed. Like, we're going to try to do the best we can, but we have to do what we have available to us, like the COVID response, like changing institutions like the Justice Department and actually doing things with police enforcement, actually going in and trying to change prison reform. Like, the executive office has a lot of control. Like, if that wasn't the case, then how did Trump fuck so many things up? Like the fact of the matter is, like, we have the ability to do the things that we can do, but if we're going to try to pin our hopes and dreams and trying to end the filibuster, then get ready to be disappointed. Because if we're trying to argue from that point, that's setting people up for failure. To think that it's even possible is setting people up for failure. We need to work until we fix the system in that way. What mechanism are you thinking is going to get rid of the filibuster other than electing more Democratic senators?
Okay, sure. And so I would say that there is pressure that can be applied by the party. Now, not saying that this is some sort of guaranteed fix, right? That there's a button, right, within the Oval Office, right, or within deep in the bowels of like the Democratic headquarters that fixes this problem, right? And this is again how this argument is constantly painted. No, but you can pressure Joe Manchin. You can actually, first of all, you can have.
What do you do if he becomes a Republican and we lose the majority because we pushed him too hard?
What do we do now?
Can I answer this?
Hold on. Okay.
Because it goes back to the whole beginning of this entire conversation,
go ahead,
which
please.
is, sorry. So what I was talking about earlier is how, with messaging and knowing your audience, and that Republicans do this really well, and they do it really well within their party. So you were talking about, Prime, how like you think that it's very different. I can't remember the exact word you used within like the issues and things like that. But if you look at Democrats in each state, the Democratic Party is very different when it comes to state party politics. And Republicans are not. They have those three issues that they hound home constantly and that are talked about all the time. So when you ask like what can be done, I mean, I think you're right in regards to the pressure that the president can apply. And I think this applies on a state level as well, because if we could get our, so let me back up a little bit. So the way that the caucus works is, pretty much any time that a vote comes to the floor, whether this is state or federal, they already know how it's going to go, with a few exceptions. And typically when they don't know that, it's because they want to put something out there. They want a message out there. But if we could get the majority of Democrat representatives, including the president, behind a few main points and get that messaging out and actually do something with that messaging, be more than just talk, I think that's where we start. Like we do need some simple messaging that is all over, not just in this state and in that state.
Okay, so I want to Neo and Maddie, if they want to jump into this. I still want to engage with Josie later on, but I want to hear what you have to say. Please, Neo.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a step back. I'm not super optimistic about how much we'll be able to get done before the midterms, but that said, of what I've read, okay, I don't know if any people are also really boring people and watch PBS, and there's this show called Washington Week on Friday nights where they do all this, like, whatever the Capitol, what's the inside scoop of the Capitol, right? But like not like CNN and MSNBC or whatever, where it's all like a game and they're trying to keep you on.
So
where they're
fun
like,
at parties, I'm sure.
But anyway, so they like talk about what's in the minds of the Senate right now. Anyway, but so like if you watch that, basically I haven't been watching it a lot because I'm enjoying my fully vaccinated life the last month. But from what I've heard the last couple times I've watched it, they're saying that basically the Biden strategy is like do the easy stuff first, like the infrastructure thing. I don't know what the other thing they want to do is, like childcare or something. I don't know. You guys probably know that. Anyway, but
yeah, they're basically like it's part of the infrastructure bill, I believe, or it was recently separated out. but it was, I think, a form of like universal childcare or some sort of like mass funding
Yeah.
for it. It's
Yeah,
changed
so
a
the-
lot since they first announced, but yeah.
But so these like Beltway reporters, they're talking about how the Biden plan for now is like first to have whatever mansion and board, whatever, do the infrastructure bill and like I don't know the easy things. This is gonna be a big deal. It's not a little deal. Like I remember, I'm old. I mean, I'm not that much older than some of the other ladies here, but like I've been paying attention to politics for oh my god, like since I was like 15 years old. So like I remember, I don't know if anyone here remembers, some of you may be young in the audience. In 2007, there was this bridge that collapsed, like a major bridge in Minneapolis collapsed in 2007. And George W. Bush did nothing, and Congress did nothing. And that's when I discovered, like, oh, actually, everything is falling apart in America. Like, who knew? But so this infrastructure bill will be a really big deal. It'll bring money, you know, all that pork stuff. It'll build stuff, and people will see it. And then, Maddie, you reminded me the important thing that's going to happen soon. That child tax care credit that's fully refundable is going to start popping up in people's bank accounts this summer, and they're going to get it like every month. And that's going to be, as like I said, the Biden administration has not done a great job of like promoting some of the COVID stuff, but that will come, and people will be like, "Oh, the government is working for me."
You're correct.
Anyway, the reason
on the correct on the child tax credit thing, but you said the infrastructure bill is going to be big and important. But like, if it doesn't get passed, like that doesn't look like it's right now. Look like it's going to get passed at all. There's a smaller version that's a bipartisan version that Joe Manchin has been working on. That the progressives in caucus say that they're not going to vote on, right? Not to approve. So then, if it doesn't get passed, then will that actually like how that be helpful? Can't talk.
Okay. Sorry. So I have not, like I said, I've been enjoying my fully vaccinated life. I've turned off MSNBC and CNN and PBS, and I've just been having a good time. But I'm enjoying my summer. But when I'll get back to it, anyway. But so I'm just this is the Biden plan. I don't know if it's gonna work. As you're correct, you're seeing all this stuff is happening. But that's Biden's plan is to do that, and then when they get that stuff, that's like the easy stuff. They think that's when they're gonna get to like leaning on Manchin for. I don't think they can like get him to get rid of the filibuster, but they're gonna push him really hard. The number one thing is gonna be the For the People Act, like the voting thing, because they know they will lose the midterms if they don't like fight back and get some protections for like Georgia or whatever. So that's their plan. I'm not saying that it's necessarily gonna work, but that's like what I've heard from the Beltway reporters. That's the Biden plan.
It's a
anyway.
That's
I mean,
okay.
I see you're so pessimistic.
Let's go to Maddie. And then.
So I'll put on my. Hopefully this doesn't derail it because like I have my own theory as to why the Democratic Party when I say they don't know how to wield power, I'm not just talking about like Joe Biden or the Senate because yes, those are like two very specific legislative or governing bodies, but I mean even like larger picture. We see this at the state level, especially in California. My sort of theory for why that is that when you look at who our party leadership is, when you look at like the average age in the Senate or even in the House, where there's the average age is so high, and a lot of those people sort of came into their own and became like forces on the national stage in the post-Reagan years. And I remember talking even with my parents about this, and like the Democrats after Reagan did such a significant shift in messaging and tone because Reagan was so popular. And so was like Reagan's brand of patriotism, of economics, because our country has seen a lot of prosperity during that time. And so that's why in the 90s, like when Bill Clinton ran, I mean, I kind of describe it as he ran as Republican light, where it's like, I'm a Democrat, but it's like very tough on crime. Like we're gonna, and a lot of it's funny, a lot of the policies that you saw them passed, I mean, it almost now I'd be like a Republican now could have written that and I wouldn't have batted an eye. And it's because that was a concerted strategy to appeal to Americans who had that rosy picture and image of Reagan during those years. The problem that we're dealing with now is that our leadership hasn't really changed that dramatically since what, like the aughts, the early aughts. And so those are folks that like, you know, built their career on that style of democratic political strategy. And so what we're seeing here is like, I mean, and this isn't just for politics, by the way, like every industry is seeing that, where their leadership is staying for longer and longer, and they're reluctant to hand over the reins to a new generation of leaders who can carry on their legacy. They're staying in. I mean, God, I mean, Josie and I are from California, and Neo from California, and how old's Dianne Feinstein now? And she's still staying in power. Like there's people that like, they're just so used to this old style of doing things. And so I get frustrated because I see them like basically drawing from the same post-Reagan playbook over and over and over, and then being shocked when it doesn't work or it's not delivering results, because I think our leadership needs to acknowledge that times have changed and that playbook simply doesn't work anymore. And we have a new generation of incredible leaders. I see people like, I mean, AOC, like Cori Bush, like Ayanna Pressley. Like I see these incredible young Democratic leaders who I want to see take more like of a leadership role in politics and start to lead strategy. And it just makes me so frustrated. And I mean, I say this as someone who, I mean, Nancy Pelosi is my House rep here. And I think, again, it's something that, while I get frustrated at the national level, because that's just more visible, I have to remind myself that, like, this can start local. Like, I need to push for a new generation of leaders at my local level. I can't just fixate on stuff at the federal level, because, like, me as an individual, I have far more of an impact in my local community than I ever could. Nationally. So yeah.
So I'll go to Amanda, and then I'd like to
I'll take off my
respond
tinfoil hat.
to Josie. Go ahead, Amanda, please.
Yeah, so you kind of just helped me so I can re-explain what I was talking about last time. So yeah, it's the kind of like gatekeepers who are staying in office and leadership. And so that same like gatekeeping and leadership is in each state, but with different platforms, like the party platforms, which are decided upon, you know, during the election. But and so back to like getting involved locally and stuff, that's where we can actually change each state's party platform and then the national platform through local organizing. And that's what it's so important. That's why local organizing is so important. If we want to, you know, legalize marijuana be one of our platform issues, then we need to get people from the community to go and be on, I don't know if is it the SEC for every state? Central committee?
I don't think so. Well,
Okay.
the central committee, and there's like different. They call themselves different things in different states. Like
Yeah.
Like the
Connecticut has like over
constituency.
20. Like in Connecticut, they have like over 256 of them. It's insane.
Wow.
And
Wow.
their state is just, it's crazy.
Amanda.
Yeah, and so those are the places we need to get involved in. Like everyone is so focused at, you know, federal issues and stuff, but if we want to actually change the dynamic of Democrats and our leadership and where we're going, we need to get involved in our community, involved in the party, in the constituency caucuses or the SEC, so that you can vote on these issues and what issues Dems talk about. And yeah.
So, okay, I want to respond to Josie, then give Josie a chance to jump on back in here. One, I think that what you're talking about, Maddie and Amanda, is fantastic. Organizing your local level is actually very important. I was trying to get to this before, like long time before, but my thoughts were like really confusing and scattered. So please don't be surprised if you didn't understand what I was trying to say. But
welcome to organizing.
But saying okay, fair enough. But saying that on the right, they recognize the importance of local elections, right? And that's why remember I mentioned that they are running candidates everywhere. That's like the whole red state plan that they had previously of when they took back the Senate, and was it in 2010? Was it? That was like the red state plan, like run them everywhere.
Yeah.
And that was part of it.
Yeah.
And they realized that you have to build a bench. You have to build a bench. Democrats are always focused on the federal level. Josie, you criticized me for just talking about the filibuster, but that's just what happened when we were discussing at the time. But I do recognize the things you were talking about before, like those things are happening on the state level, right? Those are fantastic efforts. I hope they work out. I hope that we get some votes. I don't know if that will actually translate to 2022 for the federal elections. Again, what we were talking about before. That's why I was shaking my head, because I don't know if that stuff will actually get a senator elected, a senator that has limited abilities to affect state politics that way, right? You know, like a governor gets that credit. The state's representatives may get that credit if people are paying attention enough, right? But whether a federal, a congressional senator or House of Representative person will get that, I don't know. But you're talking about something very important in terms of organizing on the local level. How important that is, because of the fact that like that red state plan worked so well, right? And they wiped out the governorships, right? They wiped out the House of Representatives and the Senate, right? We lost all of that under the Obama administration. Lost over 1,000 seats, right? Across, right? There's no bench. There's no bench to look to for our future leaders. We're just starting to recover from that right now. We were seeing a new group coming in, but like we've lost so much time. And so yes, you do have to localize on ours. It takes every level. If Bernie Sanders had actually won, right? If he was actually in office right now, I think he would be having a very difficult time getting anything passed, because he recognized it. He says it's not me, it's us, right? Not him, us. He recognized that it would take a team, a coalition, right? And not just of outside agitators, right? People organizing in the streets, that's part of it. But the other part of it is just electorally, you need a group of senators, you need a group of, in the House, and the governorship, all of that, who support your ideology and who will back you and help you out on the state level, the local level, on all levels. And you didn't have any of that. So I don't know how effective it would have been if you actually had gotten into the office in the first place. Josie, please.
Yeah. So yes, building a bench, the straight strategy always is important. I noticed that when we get into the local politics in a lot of ways, it's usually a progressive and a Democrat and a Republican, and the Republican sweeps up the votes because the progressive's going to shank the Democrat, and the Democrat's going to pretend like the progressive doesn't exist. And I know because over 450 people ran for Congress that were all running on a progressive platform. I knew most of them. Now they're not even in Democratic Party organizing anymore because they were sold a bill of goods that says, oh, if we all run, then we can do it. And then they all burned out. They're not even in politics anymore. We lost amazing organizers that we could have had run at those state levels and those organizations that you said. They could have won school boards. They could have won city councils. But instead, we sold them burning down the house, run for Congress because everybody can be AOC. And then everybody shriveled on the vine because they don't understand the relationship building that is required to be able to get the resources that you need to be able to win those federal seats so you can end the filibuster. So you're right. There are all those pieces and all those steps that are required. You're absolutely right. But one thing, and this is the thing that makes that I guess I got a little flustered in this conversation, was the fact that the left likes to doom pill people and then say work for me. So the thing is this. It's like, things suck. This isn't going to change. We're going to lose the midterm election. Now work for me and work your heart out for something that's not going to work. And it's super, super frustrating, because what I do, and I support the most progressive candidates running for office, or the most lefty candidates running for office. I always do. I always vote for them. I raise money for them. If I can volunteer, which I just don't have the capacity to volunteer these days very much because of all the work that I have to do on my actual job. So I support those candidates. But guess what? When those candidates lose because they didn't have good campaigns or good organizing skills or good relationship skills, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to work with the effing person that won so we can at least get some policies passed. And that's the issue, is how are we going to gain political power as a leftist organization if the people in power hate us all? Because we're always throwing Molotovs at their freaking head every time they poke their head out for making one bad vote, and then they're completely doomed forever. And we're going to fight them on the legislation that they're trying to pass. and then we try to beat them, and they get mad when we lose, and then we don't work with the people that beat them again. So that is why I always say that leftists need to get a little bit more pragmatic and start working with the people between election cycles. Election cycles, work your heart out, work for the best candidate possible, organize, do everything you possibly can to win those seats when they're available. But in the meantime, you better be their at best effing friends of the people who won that office, because that's the only way we're going to get policies passed. And maybe, just maybe, when they retire or when they go to another office, they'll be like, oh, Josie's been pretty helpful with trans rights recently. And I really think that she's awesome in the things that we've been fighting. I know she's a lefty, but I think she's great. And then boom, you get support from an establishment person. Like, it's not hard. It's not hard. And for some reason, I think a lot of lefties get really burnt up when they have to deal with somebody that beat them. And we gotta work with people. Like, I hate Joe Manchin as much as anybody else, but if I'm in the fight for $15 minimum wage, I'll go to his office and say, "Hey, what's up? Let's talk about something. Let's talk about the Equality Act." Those are the things that you're gonna do. But like, and then when he's running up for reelection, you better believe I'm gonna be donating to his opponent.
So
right?
I'm with you on most of what you said. I think most of what you said is extremely valuable, right? Talking about like that, it's not just electoral politics; it's organizing afterwards, right? It's putting pressure afterwards, and that's where but that part is.
I wouldn't even say it's pressure; it's friendships.
Okay, well,
Build
and
friendships
this is our difference here, right? One. I think, first of all, like, not looking at these people as like your absolute enemy, right? They're a liberal, not a leftist, but I mean, they're like totally against you. Like, these people aren't, at least I try not to look at them as our enemy. They may be our political rivals, but not our enemies, right? If we do have enemies, that's not them, right? At least I hope not.
It's like quarterbacks on a different team, right? You're not going to go and punch the quarterback in the face after the game. You might actually have a beer with them, right?
Yeah.
Like that. The thing is, and that's the problem, is that lefties have taken it to this blood sport level and are just slicing people no matter what side they're in.
Okay, and this is our disagreement.
That's actually
yeah.
But I've seen more vitriol
Maddie, I think
aimed
you see it. Go ahead.
yeah, because I've seen more vitriol aimed at like the progressive wing, especially when we think about like national politicians, than it has been like all I can't, and maybe the media exacerbates this more than like what is reasonable, but like I've seen so many more, like when Pelosi will like kind of shade the squad or whatever, but then they won't mention that like those members end up voting for every single piece of legislation that they want to, that like the Democrats try to push through. They're not the ones that are causing trouble or threatening legislation like that might not pass because it doesn't have enough support. Those threats don't come from the progressive wing. So I don't know. I at least, and again, maybe this is just how the media portrays it, and it's a distortion of reality. But it seems to me like the progressive wing of the party gets a lot more flack and vitriol directed at them than the more like moderate or centrist mainstream, whatever you want to call it, Democrats. I mean, it's even like on that one, I think it was a leaked phone call that was for a few members. It was like much earlier this year, and one of the people that won her race, but she basically said she was blaming the phrase defund the police for like the losses that happened in swing districts, and they were sort of lamenting this and sort of putting all of that on the progressive side. So I don't know. I don't know that it's progressives that I think both sides could do a much better job at like realizing that we're on the same team and that we're trying to advance things that help everyone, and maybe we don't agree on the best way to do that, or like the progressives want to do more at once than what more moderates or centrists do. But at the end of the day, like we're on the same team, and I don't know. But yeah, I don't think it's a like uniquely progressive issue that like we're the ones demonizing, because I see a decent amount of both.
So yeah, okay. My problem, Josie, that I was trying to get to, and Maddie covered part of it is, one, I think the vitriol coming from the liberal side is huge, right? I see it all the time. The poison coming from that side to leftists, punching down on leftists, and the way they never punch conservatives. They never fight conservatives the way they fight leftists. I see that again and again and again. That's where they suddenly find their spines against leftists, except but not Republicans. They fall apart when it comes to battling conservatives, but when it comes to leftists, no, all of a sudden they know how to fight. Great. But I feel that, and I'll go to you right after. I want to hear what you have to say in response. That you were talking about friendship, right, with these liberals, right? And the service, and what you said, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but yours was like when they retire or they die, frankly, right? That they'll call you up, right? They'll call you up. Oh, okay. Well, this person has been nice to me, right? And so I guess that I'll endorse them, right? They haven't died, but like if they retired,
maybe that's like best case scenario.
That's best case scenario, and it's not something I would ever hang my hat on. No, instead, my difference is that, one, I think these people should be pressured. That's where it's at. Like, you can work with them. That doesn't mean you're not pressuring them at the same time, saying, okay, these are our priorities. This is what we're pushing, right? I see that you have your own priorities. You are the one in office, certainly, and we're going to work with you to get something done, to get something in front of the people, right? Because I didn't win. You won, right? But that doesn't mean I'm going to pressure you and say that if you want our continued support, then these are the things that we want as well. We're not going to get everything we want. Like, that's not how politics works. We have to compromise because we lost. But to say that I'm going to be a friend in the hopes that maybe when you are retiring, you won't pick someone who is ideologically completely aligned with you. Instead, you'll pick me because I was sort of nice. Like, this sounds like the whole friend zone thing, right? It sounds like, well, like, I'll be her friend for I don't know how many years, and then at some point, when she gets tired of her current boyfriend, she'll pick me. Like, I don't think this is a good plan. I don't think it's a plan for success.
You're going back though to like.
I think there's a balance.
Well, no, and the thing is you're looking again. I think Josie was more talking about at the local level. We're going back up to federal level again.
No.
Because literally at the community level, you do have to be friends with these people, whether they're Democrat or Republican. Even at state legislator, if they don't like you, they will take your legislation and throw it out just because you're not their friend. Like, that is how state party politics works. That's why the caucus is the way that it is. Like, no, literally, like I passed the bill. I was up there lobbying. I know how this works.
No,
I knew that if I wanted bills, if I wanted anything to pass, I couldn't talk to any Dems at the state house. I could not be seen having friendships with other Democrats in order to get my bill to pass. That was advice I was given. Do not speak to your friends up at the Capitol. Go speak to your non-friends and go make friends with them. So that's what I did, and that's how I passed a bill. But now they won't work with me because I've worked on campaigns. I got behind other candidates, and now like I can't pass shit because I'm not their friends. And so like she's 100% correct in regards to the friendship thing, in regards to local politics. Now, if you want to get up to like federal and even like at some state and whatnot, then of course. But I think Josie was definitely talking about local level politics, right?
Okay, Josie,
as we're talking about building bench. Yeah. So the thing is, Prime, like, I'm not like, when we're talking about federal, and Amanda was right. Thank you for clarifying the local level stuff is like this. I look at politics and power and politics in the amount of relationships that you have. It's the only way that you're ever going to get anything passed. And if you are seen in the community, which I know a couple lefty friends here in San Diego that I have talked with other like centrist type people that are like part of building trades and things like that, who have literally told me, it's like, how good of friends are you with this person? I was like, I know him. I've worked with them on a few projects. It's like I can't stand that person. I'm never going to work with that person in a million and F years. Yet they support me because I actually have a friendship with them and actually have worked with them on things that were important at the time. So like for example, there would be like a labor leader who I really don't like. but all of a sudden they're trying to work on this environmental policy. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, a building trade is working on environmental policy. I can go and talk to that person because I have a relationship with them and be like, hey, can you tweak this policy so it doesn't like take over that like land over there where it's like a protected habitat? And then sometimes they're like, oh, well, yeah, why don't we just tweak it and work together so we can actually have a bipartisan type of situation? I know I hate the word bipartisan, but like a compromise type of situation where you can actually do that. And then you start building up those little points. It's like, oh yeah, I remember when Josie helped me with this thing. Oh yeah, I remember when so and so helped me with this thing. And then all of a sudden you start building a circle around you of people. Now the thing that I was talking about, particularly about the left tearing down like other, people, I'm talking specifically about people like myself who is like somebody who fights progressively but works with centrist to get policy passed and build those friendships. I have been kicked off slates because I had a relationship with the state assembly member who won the seat against somebody who didn't run a good campaign. She ran a shit campaign and she lost. And so when I started building a relationship with that state assembly member, who is a queer man, by the way, so I was like, that's not like, he actually is not the boogeyman that everybody's trying to say. And then all of a sudden, because I started a relationship with this person, I got ostracized from the own progressive movement here in San Diego. It's like, oh, like you went against us. And I was like, no, I only talked to that person because you kicked me off of this thing because some person had beef with me. And I decided that I was going to work on policy. So I started talking to this person and they like me because I've worked with them since 2012. If you like it or not, I've been working with this person for a long time. And so that's what I'm talking about relationships, because Amanda's 100% right, because this happens to progressives all the time. Ask a lot of the most progressive people in Congress or the most progressive people at the State House and ask them how many bills they've passed. Ask them what it's like to be a minority for all the bridges that they burned when they were trying to run for office and saying that this person's shit, this person's shit, this person's shit. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that person's like the leader of the entire caucus that I'm trying to be a part of. And now I'm effed because they don't like me and they're never going to let me in because they see me as a Molotov thrower. So even when you put the pressure in and win in this very hostile way, you're not going to be a very effective lawmaker because you didn't do the work of building the relationships. And that's what I want to do when I get in the office. I want to be an effective lawmaker. I don't want to win just because I was the one that just got in on a lucky shot. I want to get in because support was around me from all points of view in the entire community. And if I get a few electeds here and I get a few community leaders here and a lot of people on the ground there, guess what? I have a mandate to lead. And that's what it looks like to actually win and be an effective representative. And right now we are tearing people apart for trying to have these conversations. Believe me, Josie's cancellation in the progressive movement in San Diego has happened and already started because I'm seen as an establishment wonk now, because I actually am building relationships with people. Like, it's real. Like, it's a true fact. Like, and Neo Gaia could probably know that this happens a lot in LA too. You're great until you win. And then once you win, you're effed.
Yep. And so that's the whole thing, like, with you hating the documentary, it's because it makes activists think that they have this tunnel to get elected and then to get things passed. And you need to decide if you want to be in an and obviously there's situations where, not always, and especially at local board, like local level, like school boards and stuff, but you need to decide if you want to be an organizer or an activist. Do you want to be loud and whatnot, or do you want, and being loud is very important. Activists are extremely important. Organizing is very important, but it's not feasible to be an activist and think that you're going to get elected and then pass legislation. Of course, there are outliers, as we've seen, right? But that's not what happens. That's not how politics works. And that's like why I want to talk about campaign structure more, is because if you could understand these very basics to campaign structures and how everything branches out, we could actually understand why a lot of things are happening the way that they are. Like in regards to, we see left getting elected over here, and then Sorry, I lost my train of thought just now.
Take your time. And when you get it back, let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
One thing, really quickly, I would say that one person that actually has done this well, but this is what's given her, like, she's getting flack from the left, is AOC. And I know even in chat, people were like poo-pooing her, but like she's actually done a really great job of building relationships with people who don't necessarily agree with her 100% on everything, but they'll still co-sponsor legislation with her.
She'll still organize the shit out of her state and everyone else.
Exactly. Yeah, like she does incredible relational organizing and like has done a good job of building those relationships. But then the problem is, and this is sort of what like Josie was speaking to, is that as soon as she starts being seen as like, oh, but she's working with centrists on whatever piece of legislation, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, she's sold out. She doesn't. It's like, look, either she can maintain this like weird moral high ground that you seem to think that you have and get nothing done, or she can still like hold that as her North Star in terms of ideals, but then collaborate with the other people in her party to actually pass legislation through and hopefully use whatever influence she has or that she ends up building over the course of time to make that legislation more progressive, to like move the needle a little bit. But like that's why the whole like thing when people were saying force the vote, I was like, that is the dumbest waste of political capital we could ever fucking do. And like the fact that it was seen as like like a legitimate thing, or they're like, we should protest and say this, I'm like, you sound idiotic.
Yeah, there's an entire, and not to interrupt, there's an entire industry built around progressive anger.
Yeah, but hold on. Okay, so I think Josie, it feels like to me, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I have a wrong impression, but right now, with those points, it feels like to me that you are arguing against those people who threw you out of the Progressive Party, like the people who've attacked you in the past, right? That's what it feels like your arguments are aimed at. Because I agree with you when it comes to the relational organizing. That makes a perfect sense. That's how things got done previously in Washington when we weren't so partisan. That and pork, right? That moved things along a lot, right? But it was also those relationships. Those actually were quite important when you felt like you could trust the other person, even though you're not ideologically aligned. I'm not fighting you on that. That makes sense. And like, I guess we're getting caught up on the word friendship and what a friendship looks like, right? Like, I think you should absolutely be working with centrists because, like, unless socialists run the gamut, right? There's going to be people within the party who have a different view. Even if socialists fucking run the gamut, like, we tear each other apart all the time, right? Like, within socialism, like, so yeah, we have to work with these individuals and you have to build those relationships, right? And that can be slow, tough work, right? So that people can trust you, know that you're not going to backstab them the moment, right? And then there are individuals, there are leftists out there who, exactly as you've said, are saying that, well, you aren't fighting 100%, right, for these values I have listed out. This is my litmus test. If you fail it, right, then I'm done with you, right? There's toxic people on left doing that. I am not one of them. I want to make that clear. I want to get that across. I'm not one of them. If your story is like as you've laid it out, Josie, in terms of your past and those and your experiences, right? If that's true, I don't think I would have been one of the people who would have tossed you out because you're working with someone that I don't agree with. That literally doesn't make sense. That's not how politics operates, right? Those people don't know what the fuck they're talking about. So I think,
but the people in power operate like this.
Yeah,
so it doesn't matter if you operate like this. The people currently in power do. Like
that's the thing. Yeah, it wasn't the activists on the ground that kicked me out. It was the people at the top that were annoyed that I wasn't following the leader anymore. Like this was at the state level.
Could you help me? Could you help me out here because like you're like filling in the blanks without naming names.
Sure.
But, like, give me a structure where I can visualize what you're talking about.
Okay, so first, this was inevitable to happen to me because of the fact that what I'm talking about exists. Okay, so this is the pendulum finally swung to me, right? Like it was just a matter of time before that axe was going to swing and lob my head off because people were just spinning the axe wildly around and just just lobbing heads off all over the place. And that's what ended up happening because I was one of the leaders, right? And so when I started talking pragmatically of like, okay, so this is how it started. So not to give too much context because Prime, I don't want to be a victim of the statement of, oh, you're just a bitter progressive because the progressives in this area are mad at you, so therefore that's been waged against me and used against me as well, because I'm just telling the story that is happening to me, which is a product of the bigger thing that I am talking about, which is the fact that if progressives are starting to relent and be like, you know what, I'm going to work with this person because they told me that they actually want to pass trans legislation and they wanted me to give them pointers and conversational points. And then when I started that conversation, that's when all hell broke loose, right? That's when everything started to unravel of Josie's loyalty to the progressive movement as a whole, because how dare she work with somebody that just handedly crushed the progressive that, in my opinion, wasn't that great either way. But so this is what happened as well. So anyways, I supported a congressional candidate after I lost. And that congressional candidate wasn't the candidate that the Justice Democrats supported, Bernie supported, and all these other organizations supported, because Bernie didn't actually make those decisions, and neither did really anybody, because they just literally just said, "Oh, a queer woman of color that's a city council member or president of San Diego. Okay, this is the person we're going to support." And then they demonized me because I supported the other person that happened to be a millionaire. Not happy about her being a millionaire, but at least she understood policy. She talked to me. She understood what was going on. And the other person said that they didn't care about foreign policy. They'll learn it when they get there. For me as a veteran, that's a deal breaker, 100%. Like, if you're going to sit here and tell me that you don't care about foreign policy and then take endorsements from AIPAC and start hiring consultants from the Democratic majority for Israel, hell yeah, I'm going to be loud about that and be mad that my progressive support heroes are the ones that are supporting this person when they're not doing their effing homework, which is going to hurt our progressive movement even more when you have a progressive on the floor of Congress saying, no, like, Palestine can be annexed, it's fine. Right? Like, that's going to hurt our movement much more, especially when they were trying to sell her as somebody who was going to be a member of the squad. So it was my work that actually stopped her from getting progressive money across the nation, because I actually got a letter signed by Bernie delegates saying, hey, this is unacceptable. And she never changed her tune. So then the progressive leaders, or the leaders that were trying to push this person through because of their relationships with the city council member, they got mad at me because I became the progressive consultant for the other person who ended up winning, because I knew she was going to win because she was just a better candidate. And I saw how the campaign operation worked. So I was like, yeah, this person's going to win. I'm going to get influence in Congress. This is how it's going to work. I've been called a class traitor. I have been called non-progressive. I have been completely isolated because one rich white man who's a progressive leader at the state level decided to say, Josie's no good because she didn't support this one person this one time. And that is an anecdotal thing, okay? That is anecdotal. But what ended up happening was, because I was building relationships with people they didn't like or could not build relationships with anymore because they threw so many Molotovs at them, that's when people started going, oh, maybe Josie's not as progressive as we thought she was. Maybe Josie isn't, and even though I have been waving the flag of progressive issues from the very beginning, before most people even got started in politics. Okay. Like, so the fact of the matter is, it was only a matter of time before I said, no, I want to be pragmatic and I want to pass policy instead of losing all the effing time. Right. And I'm just like, I'm tired of losing. I want to actually be involved in government. So I started making relationships with people and started getting more involved and started like connecting with the issues more instead of the ideology. And that's when everything went completely haywire. And I was like, well, it looks like I'm done with Democratic politics for a while, because it just became so toxic that it started to affect my ability to actually lead. So it was easier for me, a trans woman of color who has put in 10 years in this state in political activism, it was better for me to say F politics and move on to nonprofit work and work at the individual level for policies to ensure that we actually get rights passed in this country than to deal with the constant drama and failures of the people who are thinking that this is how things are run. So for me, that's how my personal story ended up going to the direction that I'm going in. Am I a little bitter? Yes, but the reason is because my theories played out. And I saw this happening for a while, and I saw that minorities and gender, just minorities and period, were being pushed out of the progressive movement. And I started seeing the Democrats absorbing the lefties, the standard lefties absorbing all the minorities. So you had all the trans people, you had all, like, I was a Bernie delegate. I was like one of the few trans delegates, while the rest were Democrat trans people, like the straight up Biden supporters, right? And the Democrats have won the minority conversation. The Democrats have won a lot of the major conversations that have pulled in those members from those communities, which, guess what, wins them elections, because they're the ones that people identify with. The fact of the matter is, a minority doesn't identify with progressivism, they identify it with Democrats. And that's just how it is, because the Democrats have done a better I know, I can't believe I'm saying this, that Democrats have done a better job at something, but they have done a better job messaging to minorities and actually getting their votes than any of the progressives have done in their lifetime. That's why Bernie Sanders' campaign, it felt like minority rights were stitched into the campaign. It was like you had the core messaging of the campaign for Bernie Sanders, and then you had, like, oh yeah, George Floyd. Oh yeah, like all these issues in the policing. Like, I know people who worked internally in the national campaign and Bernie Sanders, and they talked about that Bernie wouldn't bring up race issues on his own and was always had to be reminded of those things. And that's where the heart of that progressive argument started. And that's why minorities have been pushed out of the progressive movement, and Democrats have been absorbing all the minorities. And that's why the progressive movement, I like to say this now because I think it's pretty much dead at this point, is nothing left but a skeleton crew that is majority white men. And that's just how it is. And it sucks.
I think you're too doomer on this. Oh, we have people want to talk. I disagree on some parts and agree on other parts. But okay, well, I guess I didn't tell you anything. But let's go with Neo. Let's go to Amanda then. Nia, please.
I think you were first, Amanda. Do you want to go first? I think you were.
I'm sorry, I wasn't looking at the screen. I was just trying to listen to Josie's words. But Amanda, okay.
Yeah, no, I think it's important that we kind of define who's in power here. And I think, I don't know if Josie will agree with me, I will assume, but like the DNC and is pretty much the one in control here, especially when it comes to even state level and federal level, because of how the caucus works. And that's why, back to Josie's point, the friendship thing really does matter, because if you want to be supported by Democrats, you can't piss off these old white people that have been around for a very long time and won't make room for other people. I've got a story that's somewhat similar to Josie's in regards to the whole state level. It's like what she's saying right now, I watched play out in Iowa after the 2016 election, and Sanders actually ended up getting, so Iowa had a progressive majority here at the state level in regards to like SCC members and those that vote on platform issues. The old dogs, the mostly older white males, did not like them because they had, voiced their opinions and were activists, coming up now into organizing spaces. But these are new people that didn't know how this all worked. So they were purposely left off emails. They were purposely left off phone calls. So when a vote came down, these people didn't know they were supposed to be on this call for votes. And so our progressive party within the Dem party essentially was thrown out because no one guided them. No one wanted to because they didn't make friends with anyone. No one guided them, and no one knew how it worked. And yeah, so I mean, what Josie's talking about, like it's so common and it happens. Oh, it's insane.
Okay, Neo.
That spinning axe.
Next. So Josie, thanks for everything you said. I actually, what I was saying earlier, I think when I was like, I object to what you're saying, Actually, I think we just had different like ideas of what the progressive movement is, because I totally agree with what you just said about like the self-appointed progressive people. Like I remember, I literally I had a conversation with a friend of a friend who was like a big Bernie guy, some white guy. He was like, he literally told me, he's like, oh, Black people can't be more left wing than white people because Black people don't support Bernie. And it was like, oh my God. Like every poll after poll shows that Black people are like more left economically on average than, white people. Anyway, but so like I said, I got into the political side of Twitch through Maddie. I'm on this thing. I'm sorry, roommate. So I was like, yo, like, oh, sorry, distracted by the roommate. So I got the political side of Twitch from Maddie. So like, I supported Warren. You know why I support? I've been a socialist for like over 10 years, but I supported Warren because she spoke the language of like intersectionality. God, I hate saying that word, but like she didn't just like add it on, like Josie was saying, where like it wasn't just like Bernie's campaign people were like, please talk about race. No, like when I saw her campaign rally in East LA, like it was all about like local LA Latina history and like activist history and labor history of like Latinas.
Yeah.
And then I also heard her like campaign speech in Atlanta where she talked about the history of like the working class history of like Black women in Atlanta, in which she gave her opening campaign thing, her like where she opened her campaign in Massachusetts. She talked about like the labor history, like really famous labor history and of women fighting for like 10-hour workday or something in Massachusetts. So like anyway, so it was just like, oh, it was like, no, like not only is she socked them a social democrat, but like this is not just like, oh, here, vote for me. So like it's interesting. So when I think of like what Josie was saying, the progressive movement, like I deny them this title of like them being that. I'm like the left-leaning people, even if they don't identify that way, are disproportionately people of color. That's just the way it's always been, especially like in like anyway, that's why I voted for Warren. And I'm agreeing with Josie, like the left, a lot of the left has a lot of, I would just say the white left has a lot of like internal things they need to do, and Bernie definitely did not like it. Like Bernie definitely did not needs to work on. I was hoping that in 2020 he would be better about it, but he really wasn't. And I tried. I was like, oh well.
So
I don't know.
I agree. Sorry, go ahead, Maddie, please.
Yeah, no, and one thing also that I like that was one thing I loved about Warren as well, was that like she made intersectionality such a core component of every single plan and policy proposal that she introduced, and was explicit about that when she, like, if you ever read some of her plan papers, like it was so clear that she had thought it through from that level. I mean, even Kimberly Crenshaw, who is credited for coming up with the term intersectionality, supported Warren. And I think, and that's just, I agree, because I think in some cases, and I see this with I was a DSA member here in the Bay Area, but I no longer am. And a lot of it, I took issue with how, I mean, I say this, I know it's ironic, I'm a freaking white person, clearly, but like, I took issue with how white it was, how white and male it was. Yeah. Or how, if you ever tried to bring up like the intersectionality of certain issues, it was sort of shoved to the side and said like, no, we need to like class first. Like if we address class issues, then that trumps all. And I was like, well, that's like rich coming from a white guy. Like, I don't know, maybe there's some overlapping factors at play that, like, you know, there are plenty of societies that have universal health care but still have like blatant like racism. There are other cultures where they have less like wealth inequality and a more progressive tax structure, but that doesn't fix the like intersectional issues of society. And so yeah, that was one thing. I think that's something too that maybe the left has to reckon with a bit, especially when we see people who are Black or brown like leaving the movement or not wanting to associate with it. I've seen it even with my like organizing friends. They don't identify as progressive anymore because they're just like, Yvette Afro Sabi talks about this all the time on Twitter. Like we just talked about it earlier today together. Like she's just like, I don't feel like there's a place for me in it. And, you know, and so, and it breaks my heart because so many of the things that like progressives want to do and the policies we advocate for, like at least the way I see it, it's centered in in creating a more equitable society and delivering racial justice, social justice, and like it breaks my heart that people who are the most marginalized in our society don't feel welcome in a movement that should center them, that they should be like the voices for. And it makes me want to take a step back, like as a progressive, and be like, what do I need to do? What can I do to make it so that we're more inclusive, and so that maybe we can earn back the trust of people who otherwise, maybe left because they didn't feel welcome and they didn't feel like they were being valued or heard.
Get the class reductionists out.
Yeah.
Like there's too many class reductionists.
So it feels like I think maybe Neo might have hit that nail on the head in terms of our well at least part of our disagreement. Like you saying that the progressive movement is dead. I don't feel that way at all. But I think what you're talking about is, for instance, the organizational structure you see behind the scenes, right? And I will believe you all on your experiences there, right? Those are experiences and it sounds extremely believable. Like I'm not doubting you whatsoever as to the things that you've seen there. The fact that, I mean, and this is not new to like leftist movements, like at all, right? Like look at feminism, right? Look at the track that had to go to. It was white women, upper middle class white women, right? Their struggle, and then everyone else's periphery, and it took some outside agitating, one for the larger feminism to even acknowledge them, but then it took those people to make their own like spaces, right? And to like write their own books and push out their own messages before any of that was acknowledged. So this all sounds very the environmental movement, another one, right? Like, so this is not new. What we're seeing here is that these spaces, these leftist spaces, where you would think are open and welcoming to minorities because of the messaging you hear all the time, right? When you get down to the organizing, a lot of the same bullshit happens. 100% agree with you. I'm sure it sounds, yeah, okay. But when I'm thinking of the movie, I'm not thinking necessarily of those organizers, right? So that's where we're having a bit of a disconnect here. I don't think of necessarily the organizers there. I'm thinking of the actual people. I'm thinking of the those who came out, right? Those individuals who came out to support Bernie Sanders, who weren't like organizers, but like who were part of the movement, right? Who were individuals who wanted to get involved, the passion, the energy on that side, right? And Warren too, the people who came out to support Warren. I'm thinking of those individuals when I think of the movement, right? And I don't see that as dead. I see us as down, but not at all out. Right, I see a fight coming on. I see people organizing, right, online and other places for next time. So that's what I see. But if you're talking about like within those specific political bodies that you've been involved in, no, that makes sense to me. I believe you there.
But that's the soldiers on the ground, though. Like if you don't have an army, you can have the greatest generals in the world, but if you don't have the army is not those people. The army are the people, the soldiers, the organizers on the ground. Like we started this conversation, the voters aren't going to know shit without good organizers.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I see. Oh, okay. I know what you're saying. Well, again, you and I had different conceptions, but that's fine. But you're saying that if the organizers themselves, right, are not understanding, right, like the complexities of all those people who are progressive, right, not understanding the experience of minorities, the trans individuals, the whole gamut, right? That if they are of a certain type, and that's it, that you're saying that the movement cannot advance if that's all that's left. If that's what you're talking about, okay, I can see where you're going with that. Yeah, there's other things I want to say, but I'll go to Nia. I think she had her hand up first. Now you're muted if you're talking. Nia?
Sorry. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna be. It's just funny because usually I'm a socialist. I do a lot of gloom and doom and Twitter and whatever. But I will say that actually because I've been around for so long. I remember when I was a socialist in like 2008 when that
I
was
think you
really
need to
weird.
say your age now because you've referenced it a few times, and I need to have some reference here.
Oh, I'm in my early 30s. I'm in my early
Okay.
30s. But anyway, but so like
You're like
I think we all are.
46.
We're all
It
in
sounds
our
like
early
you're
30s.
46.
Yeah, I'm
Like,
thinking
what?
you're like calling yourself 50. I'm like,
Like,
no.
no. I just
no.
I
Like,
got involved.
Medicare is just around the corner for me. Like, don't you understand? Okay.
Anyway,
I'm
but
just
I
around
just
the corner from death.
Closer to
I just
40
got-
than I am 30, okay?
I just
Hell yeah.
I just said that I got involved in politics at a young age. But anyway, but so I like became a socialist like 14, 15 years ago, something like that. Anyway, but actually I'm a lot more optimistic than, I don't know, like what Josie was saying, these people who, especially the Bernie wave that got in like 5 years ago or 6 years ago, and they're like, oh no, Bernie lost, everything is gloom and doom. Whereas I'm like, this is just when that was not just a little weird, it was like really weird. Like, you know, when I was like meeting people, like when I like over 10 years ago, and I was like, scouting about, I'm like, oh, I'm an anarchist. I'm an anarchist. Are you okay with that? Like, you know, like that was a weird thing, and now it's not that weird, especially like in LA. But like, so I'm actually very optimistic because I've seen like the culture change, like the Overton window shifting, where I'm like, wow, like all this stuff that I was the soapbox I was going off on like 10 years ago. Like, people talk, like people not just like me that are like socialists or whatever. People talk about this like in more liberal, normal circles, whatever. And even just something like a concrete example is like I went to my first like pro-Palestinian protests in like 2006. This last year, this year, when they had all these protests, I saw like a big shift, like amongst, at least amongst younger Americans, in like this issue of like not just being like 100% pro-Israel. That's just something that I've seen. So I'm very optimistic about like the trajectory. Well, I'll have the caveat. I'm optimistic about the long-term trajectory. I see like at least people under 40, 50 or whatever, like people who are not boomers, people that are younger than that are like, they're different. We're like, I'm not saying that we're all communists. We're not all communists, but I'm just saying there's like, I've seen like a qualitative shift in like, for many reasons, maybe because of the recession and COVID and whatever. Like I've seen the change and I'm like, man, this is a good trajectory. The big caveat is obviously if somehow Trump runs again and wins, or there's like some fascists, that's still, we're very much on like, we're on very thin ice. Things could go the other way, but if we get over this hump, I feel very optimistic. Which is funny because, like I said, I'm usually a gloom and doom socialist, being like, death to capitalism, but
A serial optimist. And like I say that even having canvassed in like rural red areas, but I'm still an optimist because even in those scenarios, and maybe it's because like as you guys probably seen, I can be charming when I need to, and like even in those areas I could find some common ground with people, and there was always at least one thing that we kind of saw eye to eye about, and like I held on to those conversations as just like, you know, a beacon, to remind myself like all is not lost. Like there's no such thing as an unreachable person. Like we have overlap, but we have to work to find it, and then we have to be able to like connect with those people and message them and hit enough times with touch points to change their minds. I say this as someone, granted they're my family, but like I come from a family of Republicans who are now Democrats. And that happened over like I worked really fucking hard and didn't push too hard because I know that that is not how you change people's minds. You don't change people's minds by accosting them. But
I
all you
accosted
do
them
is
with my gender and it didn't work.
ha! I don't know how that didn't work, Josie. Because I mean, anyways. But like, yeah, like it just what I found is like when you find that one area of common ground, that is fertile ground to plant a seed, to like get them open up to different ideas. Like, and in a lot of cases, healthcare, believe it or not, was like the big piece of common ground. And like Josie said, yeah, for some reason, like the phrase Medicare for all, just I don't know, it triggered something and they didn't like it. It immediately turned them off to it. But when you talked about like, I would talk about what other countries offer. I'm just like, wouldn't it be great? Like, if we weren't just funneling so much money to these insurance companies that don't actually provide care, right? Wouldn't it be great if all the money you like spent on healthcare like went to your healthcare and not this like middleman who is basically just like playing a gamble on whether or not you're going to get sick, so you give money to them every month, just in case, because like who knows. And like and when you had those types of conversations, they would be like, yeah, I hate that. Like, I wish I could just go to the doctor and not have to worry about paying a copay, or I wish that wasn't even something that came up. And it's like, as soon as you find that common ground, then you plant that seed and you can start that conversation. Maybe you can't move them on certain things because they have their heels dug in, but there's so much that we can. So I agree, Neo. Like, I can't help but be optimistic, even when things don't look so great. Like, I am terrified about having voter right protections blocked. I'm fucking terrified about 2022. I'm going to work my fucking ass off. That's why I started a goddamn company to like work my fucking ass off to push for more Democrats to be elected and to reach as many voters as possible. Yeah, I'm fucking terrified and scared, but like I'm still optimistic for the long term. Especially when I see Gen Z and what they're able to do and just how much energy there is there. Like it makes me so hopeful for the future. And I think that's also what like powers me through organizing, because a lot of it it's easy to become a doomer. It's because it's just a lot of work and you're going to get rejected a lot. You're going to have people slam doors in your face, and it's like water off a duck's back. You just learn to be able to say, you know what, I'm moving on. And then anytime you have a win, even if it's small, you hold on to it. And like, that's why I remember those conversations. I forget the like bad conversations. I don't have time for those, but I remember the good ones where I talk with the voter and help change their mind, and then I hold on to it. And it's like, to me, that's what powers me through a lot of my own organizing and activism, because like if I can change the mind of one voter or maybe two voters, that's huge. That makes a massive difference. So I want people to think that, because I think it's so easy. Like, I worry sometimes when people, especially if their engagement with politics is like resigned to things like Twitter and Twitch, it seems really daunting to get involved, or they're like, well, what's even the point if everything's fucked up? And I want to tell you, like, there's so much that is not fucked up and that is good and that is worth fighting for. And like, we need you to help with these things, because maybe you don't agree with how things are operating in the Democratic Party or at your state level or anything, but like the best way to change that is to get involved, like build relationships, show up at your town council meetings. Like that is how you change the course of things, as fucking corny as that sounds. But like, Amanda could tell you that she passed a damn bill. She went and like lobbied, and she had never like done politics or anything before, and she learned how to do that and like passed a bill. Josie was a veteran who was thinking about going into entertainment and then found her place in politics and like is helping to push things forward, and now like is doing this important research. And like Neo, same thing. Like, Neo has been involved with politics since she was a teenager and is still persisting and pushing through and volunteering where she can. Like, it takes all of us together to do that. And so rather than getting like a doomer mindset from like Twitter and Twitch and people that just like get off on being nihilists, like, I don't know, find a little bit of optimism, find a little bit of sunshine.
Find your space or create it.
I can't wait for Maddie to hire her whole campaign staff of people and like pay people $15 an hour. That was probably one of the best moments of my life, was when I actually like hired an entire campaign of like a field director, a campaign, a canvas director, and like 7 or 8 full-time paid canvassers at $15 an hour. When you're able to organize and also sustain a living wage for 12 other organizers at the same time on the donation ability of the candidate that you've been able to support, there is nothing better in that feeling. That's the pinnacle of what organizing should look like. So the fact that you started your company, Maddie, I'm super excited for you. As a former political consultant myself with my own company, like there's it's a hard slog, but if you get there, you're gonna pick up a few clients, and you're gonna start crushing it, girl. You already are crushing it. You already are.
Oh yeah, no, it's been really fun. We have relationships with some campaigns, and like have been doing some stuff just like volunteering, because I think that's also important. I'm like, listen, I would love to like work in a professional capacity for certain campaigns, but also if I love the candidate, I'm still phone banking. I'm still like gonna be I'm still gonna be a shill on Twitter. I'm still gonna make dumb, like I think they're funny and cute graphics to like share on social media to like hype up this candidate, because like that's how much I care about the cause and like how much I want to elect these people. And I don't know. It's again, like it's so easy to get involved too. I will teach you how. Any of these women here on this panel will teach you how. If
It's
you want
easy to get involved. It's hard to stay involved. It's very easy to get involved, but it's exhausting. I wouldn't say hard. It's just a lot of work. A lot of work. It's easy. It's just very exhausting.
Just get used to starvation wages.
Yes, and you were talking about the $15 an hour, and I think that's so important to campaigns, because so often people get their political careers or whatnot, their start to politics through like field organizing, and up until this last presidential election, which I don't know from personal experience, just from hearing other people talk, that this was the most diverse staff that they've ever seen during presidential campaigns. And that's with like all the candidates, not just, one or two, but the majority of them had very diverse staff. And Sanders' campaign specifically hired a whole bunch of working class people. And if we want to get, everyone involved, we can't only allow it at a volunteer level, because I mean, that makes it very problematic for obvious reasons.
People of color can't volunteer the same. So that's a problem with volunteer-led organizations in a lot of ways, because a volunteer gets the skills just like an intern does, and then the person has to work that wage at a grocery store to just survive or feed their family, because we'll never be able to get that rich experience that a volunteer brings, that gets. So it's not a sustainable model, and it's always going to pick out people who are more privileged. I hate volunteer models, but they do exist for a reason. But like, we need to start hiring more campaign workers always.
Yeah, and allowing them to unionize or like, advocate for the wages and benefits that any worker, if they're doing it, like any worker should be entitled to a living wage and benefits. Like we've seen this kind of play out, unfortunately, in the New York mayor race with Diane Morales's campaign. I mean, I knew a lot of people who were employed, like staffers on that campaign, and to see it fall apart in the way that it did was really heartbreaking, especially when it's someone who claims to care about fighting for workers' rights, for fighting for a higher minimum wage and supporting unions, and then only to not embody the values they claim to espouse. And I it just breaks my heart. But yeah, I mean, we have to think about that not only in terms of campaigns, like volunteer run campaigns, because you're right. It's a privilege to have the spare time and like spare bandwidth to volunteer for a campaign, right? Because not everyone has that. And then like that times 50 for people that take jobs with campaigns, just because historically the pay has been so low. I mean, we also see that not only on the campaign front, but then also if they're elected into office, their staffers once they're actually in office. So there was, I believe it was like a couple days ago, the House, and it was a piece of legislation that's sponsored by AOC, and it was signed on by, I think it was like 103 other representatives, Democratic representatives. It's essentially looking to get more budget for House representative offices that they can allocate towards raising the wages of their staff. Because right now, like if you see what actual staffers like in DC make, it's like nothing. And so of course you think about, well, who can afford to take that job? Usually people that are also being having their income supplemented by like their parents, because they come from money, so they can afford to take a low paying job, because then they get their foot in the door and can say that, oh, I was a staffer at X for whoever, like congressperson. So yeah, I mean, this is something that I think we have to think about more broadly, is fairly compensating people for the work that they're doing on campaigns. Because this whole notion that like, oh, well, just because they're like usually sometimes right out of college, maybe they're 22 or whatever, that doesn't mean that it's okay to exploit them or pay them like poverty wages, and then also expect them to like work insane hours and burn out. We talked about burnout earlier, and like that's part of why it happens, because it's a grind and they get paid shit. And I hope to see more campaigns address it.
You know as well as I do, Maddie, that if you're going to work a campaign, everybody expects you to work 16-hour days when JOTV comes around. Everybody expects you to work every day and just snap to work whenever anything's happening. Like it is probably the most demanding, low-paid work that you could possibly imagine. And that's why I always say the danger of romanticizing organizing and making it like, oh, it's this thing, you're going to be so popular in spotlight, you're going to go in the clipboard and do all these things. It's like, effing hard work. It's a job like anything else, and you got to be able to be willing to do it. And it's so hard because you get the door slammed in your face time and time again. You talk to terrible people that just want to say terrible things to you all the time. It takes such a heart. Like I always say this, that the people who do canvassing for a living day in every cycle over and over again, those people are the coolest humans that I know, because they just can just go and just be with anybody, talk to anybody, and they love the work and they know they're getting paid shit, but they just like making a difference one door at a time. And they're gold. That's why I pay them more than anybody when I employ.
Oh, and it's hard. Yeah, it's hard work. And it's also, I mean, like I said, I believe it or not, an introvert. So every time, like after I go canvassing, I need to like sit down in my car and not talk to anyone for like a solid hour before, like I'll finish like 2 packets or whatever, and then I just need to sit and not have any interaction whatsoever. So I'm like, okay, then I can cool off. I can kind of refocus. All right, I'll go knock my 3rd packet.
So I wanted to move around quite a bit, which is fine. You guys are talking about, ladies, excuse me, are talking about good stuff. But I wanted to address something that I asked at the very beginning as to where do you think organizing will go from here. Now, Josie stated her opinion, saying that there is simply no replacement for knocking on doors, and I think probably everyone might agree on that there's something to that can't be changed. However, we do have to meet people where they are, right? And like for instance, when it comes to phone banking, right? Like we've already changed that. Like now people do text banking rather than just phone banking, because people won't pick up their phones, right? I don't pick up my fucking phone. So that's a change in the way people have organized, right? Social media has changed the way people have started to organize, right? So like, do you see any trends that are picking up positive trends or anything?
Everything that you just said still is trash.
Sure. What about the rest of it?
Doesn't work.
I will say, yeah, like I've gotten so the one thing that I've had luck with on social media, that like the one area that I've had luck with is that it's helped to recruit people to volunteer or to consider volunteering. However, it hasn't really had an impact in terms of like voter engagement, which ultimately is like the goal of organizing, is to have those like engagement touch points with voters. I've had luck with like those methods to, because the reason I like my following on Twitter even got like semi big or whatever is because I was trying to use it to like share all the things I was doing for the Warren campaign. And like, you know, just to show people like, hey, it's so easy to like get involved. Here, I hosted a tabling event where like I literally had like a folding card table and I printed out some things at work. Thanks, Google. So like it's so easy. And so I saw some luck, you know, getting volunteers that way. But when it comes to actual voter engagement, I mean, and they've done like research on this too, and that face-to-face interaction, like through canvassing, is still the best way to influence how people feel about a candidate and influence who they choose to support. I do think, though, at least here in San Francisco, one thing I will stress for the next campaign I've either volunteered for or who I have as a client, what I saw a much better rate of return when I was having like a physical presence at events and being constantly visible in the community. And if you look at how San Francisco voted on Super Tuesday, if you look at the areas of the city that went for Warren, those were the areas that we were constantly visible. We always had a presence at like the local events, farmers markets, street fairs, whatever. And I don't think that's a coincidence, because I think sometimes, especially when you have a large set of number of candidates for like a primary, a lot of people are just trying to get some sort of indicator of how the tides are, like, well, you know, what way are people leaning? And the more you can get that visibility in their community and engage with them, the more they're going to have your candidate be top of mind. So in addition to just normal canvassing, which again is like absolutely 100% necessary, the most important
The
thing
gold
you can
standard.
do. Yeah, like you have
70% of your budget goes to the doorstep if you want to win.
Totally. The next thing I would say is I would invest, well, not only in a killer relational organizing program and training people to do relational organizing, but which I know Amanda loves, is also like having a physical presence at events and being embedded, because that also drives home the message that you are embedded in the community. You are members of the community, showing your support. And I think that from a even just like psychological standpoint of seeing it, having something be so visible, really has a big impact. But yeah, like canvassing 1,000%. Sorry, you guys gonna have to knock doors.
Yeah. Let's go to Neil, please. And then
I
Amanda.
was just I'm gonna break this with some of my pals we used to work for. What I would like to see, I don't know if they're considering this at all. So like obviously phone banking, so it's not that fun. It has a low rate of it's not very effective, but it is important. So one thing that happened is that became like decentralized. Like people were able to do that from home, which hadn't really happened before. You had to basically go to a place and do the phone banking. So it'd be good to see like basically because of this, like them to keep doing that, offload the phone banking onto volunteers at home. Because like a lot of people are interested in doing it, but they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to go and spend like 4 hours or whatever in a place. So if you can do that, like it would be great if they could like push the phone banking to like volunteers at home and then have like the organizers do all that's the fun part, the canvassing person to person. So I'll bring that up with my friends I used to work for. So
Yeah, that's exactly how I got when I did the at phone banking. I did it through that program. We could just all do it online, and it was simple. It was easy, and I could spend hours doing it, and it was fun. Well, it
If
was
you're
a thing
doing
that I
it
did.
in a place, and if you do it in a place, if you're phone banking somewhere where you don't live, use Google Voice so that you can get an area code from that like locale, so that when you do call people, it isn't like your area code that shows up. They're like, oh, it's a local. I used that trick for when I was phone banking for the Georgia special election. I'd like to think it worked.
I'm sure it did, Maddie. It was all up to you and your phone number. Okay. Amanda,
Very
please, and then
sneaky.
Josie.
Yeah. So oh, sorry. I don't know if everyone here knows what relational organizing is, but I think it's the key to organizing, and that doesn't mean that we're not canvassing on the phone or door knocking, also canvassing. But it's canvassing your own network. So that's the difference. It's peer-to-peer communication, and kind of like, so basically, yeah, knowing your network, and it's shown to be more effective than door knocking. Anywhere from 8 points to 13 points, depending on the study, from door knocking. So I can't remember the exact data in regards to phone banking, but yeah, so it basically focuses on your network using tools that are already at your disposal. So like if you're comfortable using email, you can email. If you're comfortable using the phone, you pick up your phone. You can relational organize your Facebook network. So yeah, it's not a specific method in regards to what you're doing, it's who you're communicating with.
Go ahead, Josie.
Okay, so we're talking about studies, we're talking about data. Don't trust most canvassing data studies. They always say canvassing is trash because a lot of times consultants that make money on ads and making money on digital and making money on mail are the ones that run those studies almost all of the time. So there's a couple good studies that were run by actual institutions and universities that show this. This is how I did my entire consulting firm. This is how this is what my brand was. So every time you knock on a door, there is a 20% chance that that door is going to open. So if you do get that person to answer that door, they are 60% more likely to vote for you just on the basis of that one conversation, regardless of if, as long as they're a part of the same party or at least closely leaning in that direction. So like that's a huge thing. So technically, if you knock a door 3 times, and this is deep canvassing, I like to call it. If you knock a door 3 times and you go through that district 3 times, then the likelihood is 60% of the chance that that door is going to open for you eventually, meaning that person is 60% likely to get it. So if you were to get 60% of people to open the door and you get 60% more likely to vote for you, that is now huge. Now you add a yard sign to the mix where you say, hey, can I drop off one of these yard signs at the door? Now you're building territory. And then every time, so the science goes like this. So a person has to see a name 27 times before they're likely to vote for you out of from an echo chamber, from nothing. So you have to actually see a name 27 times in the community before you actually consider voting for that person. It's just the subconscious thing. And it's like voter, that's the name recognition piece that people talk about. So if you get 3 or 4 or 5 yard signs on the street, let's say there's a house with 60 doors on both sides, right? Or like 30 on each side. That means 60% of those doors are going to open for you. And if you're, let's say 20% of those doors open for you, let's just use that number. Let's say it's 100 doors to make the math easy. So you have 20 doors that are going to open for you in that 100 door canvas. And if you have a conversation with them, they're about 2 to 5% likely to drop a yard sign for you. So you have 5 doors out of the household of 100 of 100 doors going down that way with 5 yard signs on it. People walk their dogs, people jog, people drive slowly in their neighborhoods to go home from work, and every day you have a yard sign in that neighborhood up for 2 weeks, and now you've broken the 27 time goal. Then after you go back to that turf the second time, people are like, oh, that candidate, oh yeah, my neighbor has a sign. I saw it down the street like, a bunch of times. They've had it up for a couple weeks. Sure, I'll support them. It seems like they're a good person. If Bob and Cindy over there like that person, so we're gonna like them too. There was a point in the campaigns when it comes to GOTV time where my canvassers would have signs in their hands, walking door to door. People driving by would be like, hey, can I get one of those yard signs? Because they didn't want to be left out of the bandwagon of not having a yard sign because so many people had yard signs up. It is very, very effective. But the only reason there's no good data on this is because there isn't a lot of organizations that do this deep level canvassing strategies. So when they did this, they did it in a city in, I think, Indianapolis, I believe. This is the study that they did it, where they did a mayor's race and they had a union. So like the study says, yeah, canvassing doesn't work unless you're this outlier. So they had this one data point off to the side that is like, it's the most effective thing that could ever happen. But nobody ever does that. So we're just going to ignore that data point. Well, so what that data point was deep level canvassing, where you have a paid staff of people that go door to door and are trained. And it's a labor unions funded this study. So that's why they were able to do this particular data point. So what they showed is in 2 weeks, they increased the candidates' polling numbers by 10% in 2 weeks, just going door to door, nothing else. And then over time, that candidate ended up winning because the strategy was so effective. So because of the numbers kept on going up and up and up, and the name recognition started going up and up and up, because what Prime said was 100% right. You got to meet people where they are. And guess where they are? They're in their homes. They're not always on their phone. They're not always on the internet. They're not always on the email. They're not always there. But guess what? If they have somewhere to sleep at night, that's where they are. So that's the only way you're going to be able to do it. And you know, and you know the voter registration stuff. So you know that the door that you're knocking on is actually a registered voter for the district you're voting for. So a lot of times, a lot of that relational organizing, Amanda, which I think could be the future. I'm not convinced yet. I just don't see.
Let me pitch it to you.
Yeah. But the thing about it is, with relationship building organizing, you also have to do an extra step, which is getting them to register to vote. And that extra step can completely sink an entire field program because voter registration, getting somebody to vote for the first time, is the hardest political thing to do to somebody. But once you get them to vote once, they make it a habit and they vote a bunch of times. Like I always make the joke, if you're going to register a vote, make sure you tie a string to their wrist and pull them on election day, because that's the only way you're ever going to get them to walk into a voting booth one day. Like that's just how it's going to work. So that's my only beef with relationship organizing, because if the person isn't registered to vote, is that person that you're building that relationship organizing also going to follow up with them after they register to vote? Are they going to ask them to go to the polls with them? And if they're contacting 1,000 people, chances are it's not very likely. So that's why I'm very sus about anything else outside of that.
Yeah, no, you're not really. So relational organizing is extremely effective simply because that door is already open. So like you're talking about, like, and I'm not knocking. I think deep canvassing is, if you're going to canvass that door knock, that's definitely what needs to be invested in. But like in regards to getting out the vote and things like that, are you familiar? Like, I'm sure you are. Like vote tripling and whatnot. Those terms, like where you can have a vote tripler.
Yeah, no, look.
Yeah. Anyway, so pretty much the door is already open. Like you are much more likely to have an actual conversation with someone you know, whether it's someone you really know or someone you just casually know. And so, yeah, relational organizing is literally just building upon your network and continuing this communication. So yes, you would definitely ask them to register to vote if they're not, and then you'd follow up and make sure that they are voting.
I mean, that was actually one really important thing that I brought so I hosted like multiple tables at events like farmers markets every single weekend for like the entirety of autumn and winter of 2019, 2020, until like things went on lockdown basically. And I made a point to always have voter registration forms there. And that was actually, we found one of the easiest opening lines when talking with people is saying, are you registered to vote? So that if they say no, great, I have a voter registration form right here if you want to fill this out. Or if they say, oh yeah, I'm registered to vote, then there's your lead in to the conversation about the candidate, where it's like, oh, have you thought about who you're gonna vote for yet? Can we count on your support? But having those there, we registered so many voters, or just had people where maybe it's like, oh, my daughter just graduated high school and I don't think she's registered yet. Let me take one of those just in case, to make sure that she can get registered. It's so important. And I think I love Josie, I'm like loving that pitch for lawn signs, yard signs as well, because like there's a reality that, I mean, in advertising, we know this, right? In marketing, where we talk about impressions and how to quantify impressions when you're selling a product and how you're reaching people at the top of the funnel. This is why I think about like when you're engaging with voters, I try to sort of frame it in terms of like, well, where are they in the customer journey? So like, what can I do to move them through to the next level? So things like yard signs or signs in people's windows, that's like driving awareness. And it's also reinforcing this narrative that the candidate has momentum, right? Because as they see more and more signs pop up in their neighborhood, that's making them think it's all about perception, right? So they're like, oh, wow, this person is kind of gaining ground. No, I should give them a second look. I know I've thought that for sure when I've like walked around in my neighborhood and all of a sudden I saw more signs pop up and I'm just like, oh, who is that person? You know what? I need to look into this. Like who they have all this support. That just like driving home that perception is critical. And that's also
It only
why
works in yards. It doesn't work on the side of the streets. It works in yards only.
True.
So,
I have a question though, Josie. You're the only.
That's why one more thing, and that's also why I bought a button maker. So I made a shit ton of buttons so that also when anyone showed up at my table, I had worn buttons that I would hand out to people, and I brought a whole bag of them to Iowa when I knocked doors ahead of the caucuses, and there are people like on Warren Twitter and stuff that still have those buttons. So, that I like just handed out to everyone.
I have a quick question. Then we'll go to Neo and then Amanda. Just a quick question to Josie. Does your calculus on relational organizing change at all? For instance, in Oregon, which, if I'm remembering correctly, is the only state that has like the opt-in model for voter registration now. Like you're automatically opt-in to voter registration. So in that scenario, does anything change, or are you saying the main problem is less that they are they're not registered to vote, but because they haven't voted the first time?
That's the main issue.
Okay.
And you have to teach people how to vote. Like the registration is just one step. It's super easy to register people. Like I used to register people by the thousands, and then I would go and check my district and be like, oh, I actually did my own like little anecdotal science. And I'm like, oh, so if this many registrations came in from the Democratic Party, for example, then I wanted to see how many new voters voted that cycle. And it wasn't very much new ones. Like, you know, and that you can go and look at those numbers. It does exist. But yes, I do agree. But yes, registering everybody is an amazing step because then you can skip one step in the process.
Fair enough. Okay, let's go to Neil and then Amanda. I believe she had her hand up.
Since Maddie had such success with registering people to vote, I just wanted, where the hardest state, I'm sure Josie knows this, where the hardest state to register to vote people is? Texas, because they have laws that are just ridiculous. Like, okay, like here in California, you can just go to an event, give someone a registration form, easy, right? No, in Texas, there's like weird laws about how you have to be in the same precinct or something. I don't know if it's a precinct, but just you literally cannot register someone like in a different county or something. It's just ridiculous. So that's, if you're wondering how voter suppression, and there's been a lot of talk about voter suppression, but just like, why hasn't Texas like moved along? There's a lot of Democrats in Texas, but like, why haven't, or Democrat leading people, why hasn't it moved along? One of the reasons is just very difficult to register people to vote. Anyway, another thing I wanted to say just before we move on, I got brought up earlier, but just like important theory of change thing here. I know there's a lot of people who think, I don't know, like especially in the online left, there's a lot of people who think that if people are fed up enough, they will rise up and like whatever. But actually, what I found in the experience is like demoralized people don't participate in politics. Like they're just like, oh, nothing changes. Why should I get involved, right? Whereas the reason why I emphasize local politics is like
because you can get a victory.
There's some far left. Yeah, because you have victories. There's some far left people who think that people are satisfied with like incrementalism, but I found the opposite. I found that people who win a little victory get the hunger to have a much bigger. They like, oh, I want a little thing. Let's go bigger. Like we could do more. Like so anyway, that's why I think people shouldn't be nihilistic because like it certainly hasn't tamed my hunger to have little victories. It's just been like, yeah, I want the big fish now.
Amanda.
Yeah. So relational organizing, I think, hasn't been utilized in the correct way. I think it needs to be utilized to build your campaign and build your team and your outreach of volunteers so that you can deep canvas. So that is my whole, not my whole pitch, obviously. It's about 15 minutes, but that's where I think the focus has been shifted away so much in organizing to like a stranger reaching out to a stranger relationship. And in order to build your team and get your volunteers and your paid staff, I think that implementing relational organizing in the beginning is extremely important and valuable.